Remember licensed games? I sure do. Taking a cartoon from an existing piece of media such as television, movies, or books, and turning it into a video game was a popular trend for a long time. I mean, who doesn't want to play as Barry B. Benson, where you gotta run around a hive and hijack cars while doing odd jobs like it's Grand Theft Auto? It practically prints money. Sadly, however, with video games becoming more and more expensive to produce, and not to mention expectations for said games being higher and higher, it's resulted in licensed games to be a bit of a dying art form. Sure, we'll get one occasionally like Nick All-Star Brawl or Multiverses or Peppa Pig the video game, but nowhere near to the extent as they used to. Which sucks for me, because if you took a look at my game collection, you'd be disgusted at how many of these are based on a TV show or movie. I've got all-time classics like Garfield 2, Madagascar, and who could forget Disney Channel All-Stars, starring all your favorite characters from Zack and Cody, Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place, and Camp Rock 2, The Final Jam. Wait, why do I own this? Point is, as a kid, if it wasn't Mario, Sonic, or a licensed game, I wasn't interested. I recall once my dad took me to a game store and told me that I could get whichever game I wanted, and my immediate choice was Mr. Bean on the DS. Yeah, he forced me to get Crash of the Titans instead. But you know what's better than a licensed game based off one TV show? How about a licensed game based off a bunch of TV shows, all slammed together into one epic crossover? We're currently living in the age of crossovers. Nobody wants to watch a movie with Spider-Man now, unless Stewie Griffin is gonna join him. And with a multiverse so ripe for franchises combining, it always reminds me of my absolute favorite crossovers of all time. The Nicktoons games. Sure, Jimmy Timmy Power Hour is one of the best specials of a kid's cartoon ever, but you know who's missing here? SpongeBob and Danny Phantom. And that's where the Nicktoons games come in. Starting all the way back with Nicktoons Racing in 2000, this is a series that combines a ton of Nickelodeon franchises together to take part in whatever genre the dartboard lands on. Basketball? Sure, why not?
I wish I could dunk!
A fighting game? Fuck it, make 6 of them. Baseball? Only if they're motion tracked. Ugh. My personal favorites, however, would have to be the saga of platformers that released from 2005 to 2008, pairing up different heroes from throughout the Nickelodeon universes to take down a common evil, which I like to call the SpongeBob and Friends saga, because that's what they're called in Europe and allows them to stand out among this other bunch of games. Not to mention, by the last entry, Nick lost all confidence in anything that wasn't SpongeBob, and just titled the thing SpongeBob SquarePants featuring Nicktoons. Nice, I'm glad he let them tag along. Now, I've already made a video about these 4 games, all released on the PS2 and eventually the Wii. But did you know that I actually missed a bunch of them? Yeah, something I completely glossed over in that video was that each of these entries had handheld ports, with the first 3 being released on the Game Boy Advance and DS, with the last just getting a DS version. And calling them ports isn't even accurate, because they're entirely different games, sometimes taking on completely different genres compared to their console iterations. And now while the console versions may have received such glowing reviews as, "It's friggin' SpongeBob," well, they're not wrong. I rarely see anybody talk about these 7 games. So considering I'm one of the rare few people on planet Earth to play these 4 religiously, I figured why not give the handheld versions a shot. I mean, hey, the console ports weren't anything to write home about. The best one in that bunch was just alright. So I'm definitely curious to see if I can manage to call any of these good. Guess there's only one way to find out. So let's finally complete this series of games by taking a look at the handheld Nicktoons saga. This isn't the best first impression. This color combination of white and green is just ugly, and I guess this game confirms that Timmy Turner is indeed a ghost like Danny, considering Jimmy and SpongeBob have drop shadows but not him. R.I.P. Timothy, R.I.P. The story of uniting the GBA is basically the exact same as the console version, which to me was always the best story out of any of these games. Jimmy finds out that Professor Calamitous has teamed up with the villains from various universes, Plankton, Mr. Crocker, and Vlad, which was always so funny to me, like clearly there's some discrepancy between these guys. And so to put a stop to them, Jimmy uses the power of crusty PNGs to transport SpongeBob SquarePants, Danny Phantom, and Timmy Turner over to him so they can all team up and put a stop to the Syndicate. So just how are they gonna do this? By tediously going to each character's world and closing ghost portals and collecting chips. That's all you do in this game. Yes, I said game, cry about it. Seriously, they were getting really desperate with available PNGs they could use in these cutscenes. One of them is literally just a cropped out image of Plankton from the actual episode with the lever removed. I mean, yeah, I guess it's not as bad as the SpongeBob movie game.
How are we gonna get back to Bikini Bottom?
I can take you there.
The fuck is that? Also, I know it's dumb to make fun of the writing of a Game Boy Advance game, but some of the character exchanges here are just so weird. It makes me wonder why they even bothered to include some of this. Vlad's channeling ectoplasm to the Doomsday device. We need to close the ghost portal. What about those ghost animal thingies? I don't believe in ghosts. Thanks for the input, Jimmy. Oscar-worthy dialogue right here. The whole gimmick here is that you're running around a big open stage looking for 4 chips to collect and 3 ghost portals to destroy. It took me forever to even realize this though. When I first came up to the portal, I shot at it for ages without it breaking, so I figured I had to go and do it later on, and just ran away. Only to later figure out that you have to shoot at these things for an obscene amount of time for them to break. The hit detection on them is terrible. Most of the time your weapon just shoots right through the thing. And speaking of weapons, you can play as all 4 Nicktoons here, each with their own unique moves and abilities. And by that I mean they can do move and ability, 1 each. Danny can shoot ghost lasers and go through walls. Jimmy can freeze enemies with his ray gun and go upwards on his jetpack. Timmy can shoot magic and go upwards in a balloon. And SpongeBob can squash under tight ceilings and shoot water. The balancing here is all out of whack. I almost never played as SpongeBob and Danny because of their moves being so situational. And I'd say that Jimmy is worth playing as if it weren't for the fact that Timmy is just a better version of him in every way. They have the exact same upwards ability, but not only does Timmy's attack go all around him for the best range, but it also kills enemies in 1 hit, instead of simply freezing them for a couple seconds. And because the enemy will most likely run into you while you're using the attack, you'll more often than not immediately get the health upgrade that they drop, negating the damage. Hey, I mean, I like Timmy Turner as much as the next guy, but you didn't need to make him so bloody overpowered. I often find myself not giving a shit about whatever was in my way and I just ran through all the obstacles, because running out of health with this kid was impossible.
Psst, developers. I have to say that for objectivity, but thank you.
The biggest issue with all this, however, is that with so many character-specific moments and levels, you'd hope that there'd be some kind of way to manually switch through all of the heroes. But no, that would make sense. Instead, you can choose only 2, and anytime you want to switch, you have to travel all the way to one of these pods that they're very stingy with the placements of. Now, this wouldn't entirely be a problem, except both characters have to be present in order to switch. No, this wouldn't entirely be a problem, except your partner character doesn't follow you most of the time, and you have to switch to them to run to the pod too, basically having to run around the same terrain twice. Now, this wouldn't entirely be a problem, except certain characters are unable to traverse through certain segments, and therefore cannot get to the pod, meaning now you have to switch back to the one at the pod, and run all the way back to the other guy to try and find another one you can both reach. Now, this wouldn't entirely be a problem. No, wait. That's a huge fucking problem. This gameplay is so goddamn tedious, and every level is like that. There is no variation on what you're doing, which means each one of them suffers from the same design flaws. And it would have been such an easy fix. Just make it so you can switch characters with only one needing to be there. But then, that could simply be exploited to get other characters in areas that were never meant for. But if that's the case, and to work around it you need to implement this kind of system, that sort of points out a big flaw with the way you've built your video game. Who knows though, maybe the bosses shall fare better. I literally beat Vlad by standing still and pressing the attack button. The second boss against Plankton ended up being way harder, to the point where I actually died. And that's where I realized that upon dying, you're just respawned in the exact same place with no consequence. In regards to presentation, the only real plus I can give it is that the backgrounds look nice and are emulated well from the original shows. And some of the enemies can be neat callbacks, such as Plankton's cousins in the Chum Bucket. But other than that, they for some reason chose to use this really ugly pre-rendered style for the character models, where they're done in 3D and then translated down into sprites, and it simply doesn't work. I don't see why they didn't just use traditional sprite work here. The character models are awful. Jimmy has these long, dumb monkey arms, and Danny... Why did they go with such realistic proportions? He looks gross. I'm sorry, this game fucking sucks. I got to Timmy's house and had to call it quits. It was so unbelievably boring. Sorry, Butch. The console version of Unite surely wasn't the best thing in the world, but I now have some newfound respect for it. At least in every level I was doing something different. Here it's the same routine again and again with a different coat of paint. No wonder this version is mostly forgotten. We're not off to a good start here, are we? But hey, we're not out for the count yet on Unite. It still has a chance to redeem itself. Could the DS version be any better? Or is the Unite series gonna bat 0 for 3? Let's find out. Heh, look at the box art. You know what I'm just now noticing? Timmy and Jimmy are holding the exact same gun, despite Timmy not even using a weapon in this game. Anyways, I actually played this game as a kid. It's one of the two on this list that I had prior experience with, albeit very minor. When I was in Spain one year with my family, we found one of those weird bootleg game stores, where they were selling those 795 games in one cartridges, with me and my sisters all getting one. What sucks, however, is that not all of them contain the same collection of games. And while I was stuck with fucking bloody Nintendogs or some shit, they got Nicktoons Unite on theirs. So I only have very brief memories of playing it when they let me borrow it, and I recall not even being able to beat the first level. See, when I was younger and playing video games, especially on handhelds, I couldn't get very far into most of them, because of this problem I have called not wanting to read tutorials. Then I'd run around for hours not knowing what to do and give up. I think this disease has an official name. Let me look. Oh yeah, Aaron Hansen syndrome. Nicktoons Unite on the Nintendo DS has the exact same story as the GBA port. And by exact same, I mean the exact same. Same PNGs, same text, same fucking font. How'd that happen? Oh, that makes sense. See, both of these versions of Unite were developed by Climax, the same developers. That's why the previous game used 3D models. I guess to save time, they just reused the character models they made for the DS port in the GBA one. Well, hey, at least we now got to see them up close and personal. Why is it so hard for them to get Jimmy Neutron, the one character that originated from a 3D show, right in 3D? Well, at least Donnie doesn't look as bad. First thing you can obviously tell about this port is that it's three-dimensional. No, that wasn't all too common for DS games at the time. You know, given its weaker hardware and lack of a directional pad. But let's see how it holds up. I guess since we've already discussed it, we could start with the presentation. And quite honestly, it doesn't look bad for a DS game. The game basically locks you into a small area connected by doors, but it never felt all too restricting. They did a good job at still making it feel like a big open world. And it's cool that they represent all the areas from the respective shows that you'd want to see, such as Casper High and Vlad's Castle, or Bikini Bottom and Kelp Forest. Although you can definitely see their struggle in trying to make some of these places connect. Like for some reason Patrick has a metal room under his rock that's covered in lava that leads to the Krusty Krab. I don't remember that in the show. And like I said before, the character models ain't too bad aside from Jimmy's scrunched up face. My favorite detail would have to be SpongeBob's drop shadow, which is just a fucking rectangle. It's really funny to me for some reason. But how about the gameplay? How does it compare to other 3D platformers on the DS, such as, I don't know, Crash of the Titans? I mentioned it earlier. I actually like that game. I don't know why I'm making fun of it. Well, in theory, it's very similar to the handheld version. Each character has a couple moves that you can use to traverse through levels, and thankfully they've done a better job at making most of them feel useful. Most of them. At least I can switch to any of the four at a given time, I guess. Although, I suppose to balance it out, it would only make sense for Timmy to be the worst, most situational character here, compared to the GBA version where he was a god. Jimmy has a shrink ray he can use to very slowly shrink enemies, and the much more handy feature of a double jump. SpongeBob can use his underwear to glide and blow bubbles, Danny can shoot ghost blasts and wall jump, and Timmy... well, Timmy has a dash apparently, but honestly, I didn't notice any difference in his speed compared to the others. And he can also disguise himself in a bush to sneak past enemies. Yeah, he did that in the show all the time. There are also character-specific items you can retrieve, which fills a gauge on the right side of the screen, which gives you an extra move to use when tapping the symbol on the touchscreen, which, by the way, it fucking makes it near impossible to play this on an emulator. Such as Danny phasing through walls, Jimmy using his jetpack to reach greater heights, and SpongeBob using a bubble to reach greater heights. Wait a minute. I never found out what Timmy's did, though. You'll find out why in a bit. And of course, being a Nintendo DS game, they gotta make some use out of that stylus. So we have a variety of minigames you can play, such as circling jellyfish and swiping ghosts into a portal. It's not fun, but hey, it's padding. Well, this is good and well, except for the parts that aren't. But where they really fucked up here was the control. I understand it's gotta be hard to make a 3D platformer that uses a directional pad, but if that's what you want to do, then you gotta make sure the other aspects don't get in the way with that. See, you can manually rotate the camera around with the L and R button, but a lot of the time the camera will try to follow you, which can fuck up your landing. Not to mention every time you jump, the camera pans upwards so you can't see the platforms anywhere. Yeah, that's a handy feature. I sure would hate to know where I'm going right now. I spent 30 fucking minutes running around one room in the first level trying to do one mission just because every time I'd get to the top, the game wouldn't register my jump and I'd fall to my death. fun. There's a lot of neat ideas here, but when you fuck up something as fundamental as the controls, then that's sort of a big issue. It never got as bad for me as it did that one time. They start to focus on way less vertical movement later on, thankfully, but there were times where I'd miss a jump or slip through a crack on the floor, and they're not generous with the checkpoints. So you're doing the same gameplay loop over and over again, and it wasn't even fun to begin with. It is cool, however, that a lot of the music here is reused from the GBA version. It's neat getting to hear how the same songs would come out each system. Finally, we have the boss fights, and surprise, they also suck. For the Vlad one, I could literally just stand in place and jump when a projectile was coming towards me and win easily. You have to shoot the right one and not a clone, but there's no indication as to which is which. So you just stand around shooting each one that comes by, hoping it's the right one. And they don't even play a victory animation or anything, it just awkwardly cuts back to text. The Plankton one, though... Okay. So what you do is, you shoot him with your bubbles while he's riding a giant mecha jellyfish. However, he sucks you down into this small arena, and you have to defeat more robot jellyfish in the hopes that one will randomly drop some bubble soap, so you can make your way back up, with each hit slightly decreasing the size of the robot. Cool, sounds simple enough. But I just kept hitting the fucker, and he wouldn't go down. Vlad only took 3 attacks, but this guy had like 30. Or so I thought. Now, I have to assume the game bugged out or something and forgot to inform Plankton that he had died because he had the iron will and just kept going. His jellyfish got so small you couldn't even see it and he was still putting up a fight. And then, I guess because the game didn't know how to make it any smaller, it just started growing again, but upside down. I don't think this is meant to happen. It ended up getting so big that I couldn't get out of the arena without it hurting me, so I promptly turned the game off and vowed never to touch it again. Nicktoons Unite on the DS isn't the worst thing in the world. I'd still say the GBA version is way worse, but it's for certain nowhere near good. The gameplay is mostly monotonous and brain dead. You're just running around and killing the same enemies over and over again. And when it's not drab and boring, it's infuriating, because of the controls that feel like they're fighting against you. But yeah, you know what's the best part of all this? We're all done with Unite. Now we can finally move on to Volcano Island for GBA and DS. If you remember my last video, you'd know it's probably my favorite out of the 4, so I'm hoping the handheld versions follow suit. Dude, look how fucking pissed Patrick is on the title screen. This man's out for blood. Instead of having all the heroes team up against their respective villains, Volcano Island features the Nicktoons being summoned to Volcano Island from this wise old crab, whose island is at stake due to the monster the Magoo being unleashed. And so SpongeBob, Danny, Timmy, and friends have to put a stop to him. Fucking lazy-ass Jimmy. This game just kinda drops you in, too. At least in the console version, we get to see the crab summon SpongeBob and Danny to the island. Here we just have it open with Timmy falling and asking where everyone is. I guess that's what manuals were for, I suppose.
Let's just check and see what we have to... Oh wait, the game didn't ship to me in time.
First of all, can I just take a minute to appreciate that this is a screenshot from an official game? Those were the days. Gotta say, opening on Timmy Turner had me completely on board. But in the biggest fucking tease of the century, we immediately ship to SpongeBob and have to rescue Danny, then Timmy like 2 worlds in. I gotta say, the sprite work for this game is amazing. I was really surprised at how high quality it was. The characters are all super stylized, to fit into one uniform aesthetic, instead of trying to replicate the style of each individual show, which works way better for a handheld game like this. Wait a minute. Fuck, well this isn't gonna help with the comparisons. Now, a big issue with Unite was that all the characters were way too fucking big on the screen, which made it hard to see upcoming obstacles. But here everything is made nice and clear. The characters' moves are all portrayed well to the player, like how Danny's ghost form has an actual transition this time instead of a jarring change in model, or how Timmy squashes and stretches when pulling on a grapple, or doing his Sonic jump. They all have fun little idle animations too. The presentation here is top notch, there's so much personality. I love that when you go inside a level, none of the characters fit in the little transporter and therefore each have a unique squished pose. Stuff like that really gives your game a certain charm to it. That's hard to replicate. But you can tell whoever worked on the visuals here really put a lot of time and effort into it. A criticism I have of the visuals, however, is something that the console version also suffers from, and that's that when your whole game's gimmick is that it takes place on an island, it limits a lot of your locales, and you can see this reflected in the worlds we have here. We have beach level, jungle level, fossil level, and who could forget desert level. It also has fossils. It can just be a tad samey at times, and I wish there were a bit more variety. Thankfully though, what the game lacks in unique levels, it more than makes up for with the gameplay. Volcano Island is a standard enough platformer. Much like Unite, you can switch between 4 characters, SpongeBob, Danny, Timmy, and Patrick, who all have 1 to 2 moves each that they can perform to help you get through a level. Giving each character around 1 move may seem limited, but it works entirely in its favor. See, they had this really neat idea that Climax may have never heard of called letting you play as whoever you want whenever you want. Simply pressing a button cycles through your roster on the fly. Because they can each perform 1 special action, it could be seen as something similar to the arsenal you get in a Mega Man game, where you choose whichever can get you through the scenario the best. SpongeBob is used for, who could have guessed, blowing bubbles. Except instead of solely being used for an attack, the longer you hold down the button the further its reach, with it floating up in the sky at the end, which can be used to activate certain switches, with them later on gaining a tunneling move. Patrick can use cannons and glide around using gusts of wind to reach higher places and stick to walls. Danny's ghost ability is the best it's ever been used. Instead of simply phasing through walls, you transform back and forth to make certain blocks visible. And Timmy, well, Timmy for some reason just turns into Rise Star. All of these moves make it really fun traversing through levels, as at times you gotta get fairly good at switching between characters on the fly to use whatever one is needed. And they make some good challenging segments out of this. And if that's too easy for you, they've also integrated a ranking system of some kind. You can collect 5 golden hearts in a level, think of it like red star rings in Sonic. But unlike those, they also act as a health bar, so if you get hit you lose one. So basically to get the best rank on every stage, you need to find and collect each heart without losing a life, which can get pretty hard at times. They even unlock you some secret levels for after the main campaign, which is a cool reward. That's the gist of the gameplay. It's pretty simple, but it works entirely to its benefit. Each level is short and sweet, and there's only 16 to beat before the final boss. But I don't mind that at all. Like I said, short and sweet. Speaking of bosses though, we could have definitely used more of those. There's only the Mago at the very end, and even then, could it really even be considered one? You're just running to the goal trying not to get hit by the projectiles he's throwing at you. The PlayStation 2 version didn't have a ton of fights, but the ones it did have at least stood out, such as a giant sand monster and Plankton King. The hub world I also felt wasn't necessary. I get the idea behind it, not to mention locking off worlds naturally behind abilities you don't have yet is cool. It's much more immersive than a big locked symbol or something, but the layout for this is all over the place. I spent more time in between worlds trying to find the next one than I did in some of the stages. You know what else rules about this game though? The music. Some of them I could take or leave, like the more atmospheric ones, but a majority of these tracks are great. It's super bouncy and catchy, I love them. The guy who composed the themes made a few YouTube videos where he goes over them, and even shows some unreleased songs that never made it in. So definitely go check that out if you want to. Finish this one first, like the video, subscribe. Battle for Volcano Island on the Game Boy Advance was a breath of fresh air. An actual good game for once. I'd probably put it above the PS2 version because of how much more polished it is compared to that, even if my nostalgia wants me to say it can't be topped. But with a short campaign of around 2 hours, I'd recommend checking this one out if it interests you. I think you'd be surprised how fun it is. With its short but engaging stages and wonderful presentation. Here's the question though. Could the upgrade in hardware possibly top it? I mean, this is the Nintendo DS we're talking about here.
Which was known for its many, many quality titles, such as... It's not even in here.
The menu screen here is so lazy, it's just a stock PNG of SpongeBob with the Nick splat put over top a blank white background. This here is giving Unite the run for its money. Battle for Volcano Island on the DS thankfully has the same story as the GBA version, so there's not much else to go over here. Our heroes are summoned to stop the Magu, yada yada yada. Most glaring difference you could probably tell compared to Unite is that we're back to 2D gameplay instead of 3D, which is only for the better. I might prefer 3D games over 2D, but even I have to admit, trying to make a good 3D game on the DS is hard enough as it is, never mind on the probable shoestring budget these had. Also, unlike the previous version, we have some more characters here. You can't play as any of them, but they are here. Such as Patrick featuring these god-awful sprites. Yeah, you can't play as him this time, sadly, as well as Tucker from Danny Phantom. There's probably more that I'm not mentioning, but as you're gonna soon see, this one couldn't keep my attention for very long. Also, Jimmy is here too, like not on some projector thingy, he's physically on the island. Son of a bitch doesn't want to help. See, I was right, he is lazy. First thing I noticed here is how much worse this sprite work is compared to the other one. It's not bad or anything, but there's way less personality. The only thing it has over the GBA version is that the backgrounds are way more detailed and colorful, but I'd expect that from a version on a higher powered console. I don't know, just like look at Timmy here compared to Timmy from the other game and tell me what you think is more expressive. If you want expressive though, you'd better look over at the cutscene sprites. These things are abysmal. SpongeBob SquarePants more like SpongeBob Cube Shorts because this shit looks bootleg to hell. It's all like weird imitations of whatever style the character originates from. But whoever designed these mustn't have been getting paid enough because they look dreadful. Just look at Timmy's hand or Cosmo and Wanda. They didn't even try with Danny. He's always doing his stock hands down by his side pose and... Oh my god, Jimmy, what the fuck did that do to you? It's so weird too because I can tell exactly what they were referencing here, and it's those weird Jimmy Neutron comic books from the early 2000s. Ugh. I will give it this, the animations are all pretty good. I love the spin they do when they're switching places, and the added detail that when you fall from a large height your character shivers in shock. You know, I'd probably like this a lot more if it didn't stop me in place for 5 seconds, but that's neither here nor there. We're dropped into the first level where we're met with a plant with a dog's head. I'm just gonna be moving on. I ran around this first level for like half an hour having no fucking clue what I was meant to do. I got all the way to the end where the characters stopped at this door and were like, we need to get 3 crystals to open the door. Which I ran around killing every enemy I could. One of them was bound to hold the crystal, right? Well, no. What I later found out was that you have to fucking walk up to the dog plant creature and touch him with the stylus, and sometimes, just sometimes, they'll give you a crystal. It's fun. This doesn't change throughout the game either. In the second world, you have to give monkey plants a banana in the hopes of getting a crystal, but most of the time they'll just send out an attack. Yeah, that's neat. Now this doesn't seem too bad, until you remember that only one of the DS screens has a touchpad, meaning that you have to focus on verticality, and make sure that you get the thing on the bottom half of the screen so you can touch it. And after a while, it just gets tedious. Each and every level, it's the same song and dance. And because of the limited level variety seen here, it even more so causes the whole thing to blend together in my mind as one big mess. Well, maybe you'd think having 3 playable characters instead of 4 might condense it a tad, allow them to make sure each of them are fully fleshed out and fun to play. You'd think. The controls here just feel off. Platforming is especially hard. The jumps feel so delayed and your characters are so heavy, which can get very annoying in a game very reliant on vertical platforming to reach the goal. SpongeBob can once again blow bubbles and glide. Danny can punch, being the strongest, and Timmy can double jump and has this weak-ass vacuum attack. If you want my unbiased opinion, just play as Timmy until another hero is called upon. His double jump makes the controls somewhat bearable. Danny doesn't even go ghost with his regular abilities here. Isn't that like his fucking gimmick? In between stages, there are these crappy minigames where you can stand over the shadow of the fruit dropping and collect it, avoiding spikes and snakes. I genuinely don't know what this is for. I don't think it goes towards anything. There's also a boss after every world at least. And hey, they're not the worst thing in the world. The Planka even Naruto runs. These were probably the best part of the game, honestly. The music is also just alright. It's not the best, but not the worst. It fits the levels while playing them, but I have no interest in listening to this shit outside of the game. There are a measly 5 stages here, where you're just doing the same thing over and over again. The third world has a dolphin plant. That makes it different, right? I got to level 3 and called it quits. I got everything I needed with this one. Maybe the game gets like infinitely better for its final 3 stages, but it didn't keep my interest enough for me to get there. I don't know how the Game Boy Advance version managed to be 10 times better here, but I guess it's just because that one knew what it was and set its goal way back, just aiming to be a basic get-to-the-goal platformer, whereas here the very concept of needing to mindlessly walk around touching monkeys is flawed from the core. Not to mention that one gave you incentive to switching characters, and made each of them fun to play in their own right, while this one rarely has any character-specific gimmicks other than, see a tall ledge, use Timmy, see a big gap, use SpongeBob, and Danny's here too, I guess. So with its shitty, repetitive, boring gameplay and poor controls, Volcano Island is going second on the list so far. It really says something about Unite, doesn't it? So overall, Volcano Island's 2 handheld entries ended up being a mixed bag. One very good game, and one that's just not even worth mentioning. So I'm curious to see if we're going to manage to find one that did the impossible, and made 2 good versions for portable consoles. Sad to say, it seems like we've only gotten 1 chance left. Let's hope it's a good one. If you remember my review from way back when, you'd know that Attack of the Toybots was my second favorite out of the bunch. Despite being incredibly short, only having around 7 levels with 1 being the tutorial and 2 crappy mech stages, and hell, not a single boss even though it advertised these cool fucking robot designs of the main characters on its box, I still find it to be a fun time, mainly due to its surprisingly challenging stages that tested your reflexes, yet never became frustrating with the forgiving checkpoints and infinite lives. So let's see just what the GBA version has to offer, with it being our last look at the system for the video, as Attack of the Toy Bots released pretty late into its lifespan. It's another 2D platformer here. You'd think with 3 of them by now they would have perfected it. The plot is, surprise surprise, the exact same as its console counterpart, with Professor Calamitous, yes, I'll get to that, wanting to win the biggest genius award, and so he's harnessing energy from all the different Nicktoon worlds in order to prove this. Okay, so, first of all, why the fuck are they using stock art of his goddamn Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2 design? The first game it managed to use 3D screenshots well enough. I guess it's so he could easily be placed beside this fine fella. That's just a guy. We then see our 5 heroes locked up in a cell. I mean, they all seem pretty happy about it. Well, except for Timmy. But Cosmo and Wanda only have the energy to release one of them, which you can choose. Guess who I picked? Now, this is a neat idea, allowing the player to choose which character they want to start with. SpongeBob, Timmy, Jimmy, Danny, or Tack. Oh yeah, this is around when Tack was getting his own show. The games he first starred in were such a big hit that I can only assume Nickelodeon thought he was going to be the new big thing, and so started throwing him in with all the other Nicktoons to help advertise. His show was cancelled 26 episodes later. Graphics-wise, this game confused me. The character sprites look like they're trying to imitate the ones seen back on the good version of Volcano Island, which is a good thing, but the animations look way more cheap. They're nowhere near as expressive as last time, not to mention that we now have playable characters like Jimmy who just look bad. Every unique asset made for this game though was really ugly. The enemies look like they're done in an entirely different art style. The robots look like they've just taken the 3D model and tried to make it a sprite by tracing over it, which clashes a ton with your hero. The even bigger issue, however, is that they're so goddamn big, meaning they take up so much screen room that makes them hard to avoid. But I guess that's about why this game plays like shit, and not that it looks like shit, so I'll save my criticism. The locations also look boring as fuck. Fairy World has never looked so colorless. And when your game mostly takes place within a factory, it leads to worse location variety than Volcano Island. I don't know how the fuck that was even possible. So yeah, presentation here, mixed bag. But see, the structure is actually something that I think is really cool, and something that I wish they had done in the console version. In that game, other than Bikini Bottom, Amity Park, and Fairy World, all the levels take place within a toy factory, although they do offer some kind of differentiation at times, such as baby toys or space toys. But here how each level works is that each factory is in a different character's world. So you start in the outside, in Pupununu. That's Tax Town's dumb name, by the way. Or Fairy World, or the Ghost Zone. And after a bit you fall into the toy factory for the second half. That's not a bad idea. I wish all the factories didn't look the same, but I can't expect everything. Issue is, I spent ages running around the first level not knowing where to go. I'd see a bunch of stuff that Cosmo and Wanda would inform me that I can't get to. And so I run around forever only to find out that Timmy's special ability is turning into a frog so he can get under certain low ceilings. Yeah, that sure screams Timmy Turner. All the characters have one move they can do. Timmy's aforementioned frog, Jimmy can hack platforms to make them turn to other directions, Danny goes ghosts, Tack can climb, and SpongeBob, I never found out what SpongeBob did. I actually thought this was a really cool concept. It means that every time you'd go through a stage, you find yourself needing to take different routes here and there, encouraging extra playthroughs. It'd be better if the game were fun to play though. Again, like I said before, all the enemies are way too big. Timmy's main attack takes like 3 seconds of build up to actually go through, so by the time Cosmo and Wanda hurt them, they've already smacked me around. Although the game is so generous with checkpoints and there are no lives, so I find myself doing the exact same thing as Unite, where I just barrel through everything not giving a shit because I know that I'd probably reach the next checkpoint before dying. There's no challenge here other than the shitty controls. Oh look, it's Angelica. Alright, bye. There are segments where you can drive in mechs, which I thought was gonna be rad, but it only further exemplifies that mindset of not giving a shit, because these things are so powerful. It has infinite ammo, is way stronger than your regular moves, and has a fuck ton of health. This becomes even worse during the boss fights, where you face off against one of the character's robot doppelgangers. This is all I wanted as a kid. How cool is this gonna be? With the mech, you can just sit in place and attack it over and over again. If you lose said mech, it simply respawns back where you find it. Kinda underwhelming, not gonna lie. After each fight you get a key, which can be used to unlock another hero from their keyage. Naturally my first two were Timmy and Jimmy, awful sprite aside. So alright, cool, we beat Fairy World. Time to take on the second boss to see if it's any more challenging. What the fuck? Do I really have to beat each level over and over again with each new character I unlock? Is this really gonna get to a point where I have to replay levels 5 times in a row? That is fucking abysmal. That is such lazy padding. You may be wondering why this is an issue, considering each character gets some kind of unique pathway, but they still have to play the exact same intro and outro segment, and the fundamental controls are still the same, it just changes the way you get to the end. Also, it's just like nice to see a change of scenery at some points. I don't want to play through the same level potentially 5 times, don't care what pathway I take. Imagine you're playing Sonic 3 and Knuckles and you beat Angel Island Act 1, then it teleports you back to the start like, great, now I beat the level, it's Knuckles. At that point, just give each Nicktoon their own campaign that you can pick at the start of the game instead of this shit. Volcano Island has shown us that a short but good game is miles better than a long but boring one. So yeah, that's why I never found out what SpongeBob did. I got so bored that I had to give up. Neat locales are cool and all, but when I'm expected to play through them over and over again, it starts to get old. I don't even know why they made this one considering nobody gave a shit about the GBA anymore by 2007. I can imagine that's why this one may have come out the way it did. Everybody was way more focused on the DS. So who knows, maybe that version will be better. I can only hope. Attack of the Toybots on the DS actually has a slightly different plot this time. Different plot, same awful Jimmy sprite. After SpongeBob and Patrick sneak into a toy factory that just opened up in Bikini Bottom, Patrick winds up getting kidnapped, and so Danny, Timmy, Jimmy, and Tack all jump down to help him get his friend back and take down the factories, which, like the others, are being run by Calamitous. The sprite work in the cutscenes might be the worst so far. Tack looks so fucking ugly, and Timmy has this weird like bump in his teeth. How can you fuck up the most iconic part of his design? First thing you probably notice here is that for once we don't have a platformer, 2D or 3D. Instead, Attack of the Toybots for DS is a pseudo 3D beat 'em up. It's quite simple. You run into a room, the game gives you a wave of robots to defeat, and then you move on. The gameplay sadly isn't the most interesting. Each character has one attack. Do it 3 times for a stronger one, and hold in the button to do a super move. That's all you can do. There's no kind of combos or fun way of stringing together fun unique moves specific to the character, which is a little disappointing. Although I suppose switching up your character pairing each stage could possibly make things more interesting. I stuck with Timmy the whole time, predictably. Each character also has a special team move they can perform as well, but really it's just a screen nuke with a certain animation for each player. The game can be a little repetitive at times. Pretty early in, it's going to start asking you to defeat like 100 enemies per wave, and each level only has like 1 mini-boss each, which aren't that difficult. For some more variety, they also let you get in a mech at certain points, but really it's just as overpowered as the Game Boy Advance version. They tear through hordes of enemies so easily, it feels unfair. There are segments where they give you these short little tasks to do using the DS stylus, but they're not fun in the slightest. It's basic shit like, pull down the lever to crush a metal cube, or use this crane magnet to pick up a block with really shitty hit detection, or spin around this little thing to get the platform to match up. And then it's like really fucking precise though, it took me ages just to get this. At this point I was ready to call it quits on stage 1. What's the point if it's just gonna be this exact same thing the whole way through? But upon beating the first level, I was presented with this mini-game, where you ride around in the mech trying to get nuts and bolts while trying to get to the end. And that's where I started to get invested. See, during the stages when you defeat an enemy, you get the exact same nuts and bolts. I never knew what these were for. I had collected hundreds of these, and supposedly they weren't going towards anything. Until I got here. Turns out these are used as fuel for driving, with them constantly going down, and when you hit a crate you lose a bunch at once, so you have to reach the end of the level without running out. And after said driving level, you're faced with a boss fight against yet another robot doppelganger, except these are from a first-person perspective and feel much more like a rival fight than a boss, which works out a lot better. It looks like fucking Punch-Out! What you have to do is shoot at them with your bullets, left for weak ones and right for stronger ones, but it takes longer to charge up, while avoiding their attacks towards you. For a while I was confused as to where my health was. The robot's is in the top left corner, but mine is nowhere to be seen. But that's when I realized that your screws also act as your health bar during a boss, with you losing a bunch after being hurt. This is where everything clicked. Such a simple way of combining all of these disparate missions together with something as integral as a collectible meter does wonders in unifying them all. It makes it so that there's an added challenge and something else to consider while playing through the regular stages. It almost removes that repetitiveness, as now I actively want to defeat the enemies and collect all the stuff, so that I go into the boss knowing I have the best chance of beating it. I'm surprised at how much this improves the game. What else improves the game? After each stage you unlock a new Nicktoon to play as. And not just from the already represented franchises either, there are new ones here too. On top of the normal 5 characters in your roster, you can also select Mr. Blick from Cat Scratch, Manny Revere from El Tigre, Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot, and Zim from Invader Zim. And if you collect all the extra character portraits in their racing levels, you can also unlock Gurr. They even have SpongeGar and Evil Danny as secret playable characters you get through cheat codes, that was cool. There's a lot of meat to this game, surprisingly, despite on the outside appearing to just be a simple beat-em-up. Not to mention the presentation here is top-notch, Timmy's brown pants aside. All the sprite work here is great, the moves are telegraphed well, and I love that all the locations are using 3D models. Creates this super stylized environment where the players stick out a bunch compared to the world. Really, the only thing I could want done better is having some more enemy variety. You're fighting the same bots constantly here just with a different coat of paint. If you're gonna make me fight 50 million enemies, I'd love to at the very least see some new ones every once in a while. The music is also the best out of the bunch we've seen so far. It's so fucking catchy. I love a majority of the tracks here, they're so funky. I was surprised how this game managed to turn me around, from wanting to only play it for around half an hour because I assumed it had no substance, to almost beating the whole thing. And I definitely find myself wanting to go back and finish it at some point soon. It was a lot of fun. So with superb presentation, simple but fun gameplay, and an engaging way of unifying all the different gameplay styles, I definitely recommend checking this one out. Can't believe we're 6 games in and we've only found 2 of them that are worth playing, but hey, that's 2 more than I thought we'd have. I don't know what it is, but anytime I see a console game get a handheld port, my automatic assumption is that it'll be worse. Maybe it's a result of me growing up with a mountain of crappy DS games like... yeah, that. But with the console versions not even being very good, I didn't have much hope for a single one of these things, but so far I've gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised. So, I suppose there's only one more to go. Let's hope they go out with a bang. Coming out in 2008, the Game Boy Advance was mostly dead in the water at this point, so I take it they only felt it was worthy coming out in the DS, which was still going extremely strong. Speaking of dead in the water, these Nicktoons games in general, I can only assume that Attack of the Toybots didn't sell as well as they'd hoped, and so tried their best to have Globs of Doom perform better, dropping Nicktoons from the main title, and advertising it as more of a SpongeBob video game. Since this is the last game we're looking at, you can assume it did not turn out as well as they'd hoped. I actually remember my friend owning this version of the game for his DS, and every time I tried to play it I had no idea what the fuck to do and put it down. I thought it sucked. Doesn't give me much hope. In Globs of Doom, all the heroes are summoned back to Volcano Island to investigate the mysterious orange goo falling from the sky and turning people into monsters. The whole gimmick here, however, is that not only do you play as the heroes, but their respective villains too. We've got SpongeBob and Plankton, Danny and Technus, Jimmy and Beautiful Gorgeous, Sim and Dab, Tack and... Tax Villain. I've invited a team? Wow, Jimmy. You hand-selected who you wanted to come and didn't pick Timmy? What a dickhead. For a DS game, the presentation here is actually pretty good, once again combining sprites with 3D locations, which is a style I can't get enough of. All the locations are based on the characters' worlds too, which allows them to be varied and stand apart. Now the gameplay is where it starts to be very different. Globs of Doom is once again a 2D platformer, except what makes this one stand out is that you're playing as 2 fixed characters in a level, who you can freely switch between whenever you want. Although when you do switch, the other one doesn't go away, or even follow you, so your mission is to try and get both characters to the end. That sounds awful, and believe you me, I was thinking the same thing. But the more I played it, the more I realized that I really like this game. Each character has one special ability they can do. I won't go over all of them because there's so many characters, but for example, SpongeBob can create a platform that goes upwards using a bubble, Technus can glide, Danny can walk through walls, and Plankton can ride on rockets. And much like the GBA version of Volcano Island, you have to know where and when to use their moves to get them further in the level. It's a lot slower paced of a game compared to that though. I'd almost call it a puzzle platformer, because there are a lot of times where you have to stop and think for a minute to figure out how you're not only going to get to the end of the level, but make sure your teammate gets there too. This results in a lot of stop and go gameplay, where you run around as one character looking for a button, so the other can get through their segment and vice versa. But I didn't mind this slower pace at all, because I find it fun to figure out these problems, and when you do you're like, oh yeah, I feel smart for besting this baby game. Just let me have this. You're even given a helpful map on the bottom of the screen that helps you see where you and your teammate is, and what obstacles are around them. I'd much rather take that than the level being obscenely tall with so much empty space. The bosses suck though, you're just mindlessly attacking them when their weak spot is open, and avoiding their easily avoidable attacks. It's brainless. I don't really have much to say here, honestly. This is just a solid little 2D puzzle platformer. Much better than the console version at the very least, that one sucked. I'm surprised, I don't see anyone talk about this one as much, but I could see myself coming back to it every once in a while when I want to relive the glory days of Nick crossover games. You're alright, All-Star Brawl, but the lack of Timmy games, that's what's doing ya. And don't give me that excuse of Timmy not being allowed in games because of contracting issues. If you haven't noticed yet throughout this entire video, Timmy has been in 1 or 2 of these things. But that's it. We're finally done looking at every game in this saga, excluding like fucking Freeze Frame Frenzy or whatever it's called. You take pictures, there, that's my review. I wasn't expecting to say this, but some of these games were actually pretty good, I'm stunned. With how mediocre the PlayStation ports were, I was only expecting these to be worse. But entries like Attack of the Toybots for DS, Globs of Doom, and the GBA Volcano Island were genuinely good times that I'd be more than happy to try out again at some point. If I were to give these games some kind of ranking from worst to best, it'd probably go something like this: Unite for the Game Boy Advance, Attack of the Toybots Game Boy Advance, Unite on the DS, Volcano Island on the DS, Globs of Doom, Attack of the Toybots DS, and finally, the winner, Volcano Island on the Game Boy Advance. It really is a shame that we don't see these things being made in the scale they used to be. Like I lamented at the end of my last video though, it's harder for them to do now considering what franchises have they got to work with. Since then, it's actually gotten worse. With no Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle show running, it's literally just SpongeBob and Lincoln Loud. I guess Baby Shark too. Although, I think if Nick All-Star Brawl's initial hype can show us anything, it's that a lot of these older characters still have huge fan bases, who are more than willing to buy a product starring them. So I wouldn't see an issue with Nick maybe trying their hand at another crossover platformer at some point in the future. Even better if they could actually make it good. If not, however, I'll still be able to appreciate this selection of games, even the bad ones. Because the idea is just so cool to me, that these four franchises were able to cross over with each other on the yearly for nearly half a decade. I think maybe we took that for granted, but what are you gonna do? Okay, I had finished the video and all, but did you know that Nick made a series called The Portal Chasers on their YouTube channel about the characters going to different Nick properties, starring fucking SpongeBob, Lincoln Loud, Ronnie Ann from the Cleveland show Lincoln Loud, and like Henry Danger from a live-action sitcom that was turned into a crappy animated Dan Schneider fucking feet lover. They had episodes where it's SpongeBob teaming up with Danny and Jimmy, and they still left out Timmy Turner. Why do they hate this kid so much? What did he do?
4 notorious villains with a plan to destroy the Nicktoons universe will face off against a heroic foursome united in defending it. Nicktoons Unite! Saving the Nicktoons universe one world at a time.
That was just a bunch of cheap walk cycles!
As technology has advanced over the years, the video games we play have gotten bigger, stories are more climactic, and worlds are more expansive than ever, really making you feel like you're the character and a part of the world you play in. But with this causes games to become more expensive and time consuming to produce, which has led to a devastating side effect, and we've lost a huge part of gaming because of it. I'm of course talking about crappy license games.
I'm going to die.
If a series or movie came out that was at least somewhat successful, a third-party developer was there to scoop up the rights, slap together a shoddy subpar game, and rake in the profits from using a recognizable brand. I don't care what anybody says, I love licensed games to death. Lego Star Wars, amazing. Simpsons Hit and Run, masterpiece. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, instant classic. And then we have the kings of handing out their properties to game developers, Nickelodeon. During the 90s, Nickelodeon had the Nicktoons. Basically, it was just all their cartoons at the time. You know, Rugrats, Rocko's Modern Life, Ren and Stimpy, etc. With most of their shows being huge hits, we got plenty of games starring their characters. Now, the majority of these games were pretty bad, but I'd like to focus on what they decided to do during the 2000s. Crossover games.
Timmy Turner?
What is this? A crossover episode?
SpongeBob SquarePants, Timmy Turner, Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, the gang's all here, teaming up to kick some butt. Do you get it? I said bot instead of butt. Now all of these characters had popular shows running at the time, and they all had their fair share of games. But seeing them get together to take on a greater force is still such a cool concept to me. We never see anything like that today. I mean, what's the closest we've got? Cartoon Network Battle Crashers? Okay, yeah, sure. This epic saga got mostly mixed reviews, but undoubtedly did well in terms of sales for us to still be getting these games to this day, with the most recent installment being Nicktoons Racing. But today I'd like to focus on the main four, being Unite, Battle for Volcano Island, Attack of the Toybots, and Globs of Doom. To start this long-lasting string of crossover games, we got Nicktoons Unite for the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, Game Boy Advance, and DS. This started up the Nicktoons series. Well, in America at least. Over here in the UK, it was known as SpongeBob and Friends. Not really hiding our bias there, are we, Nickelodeon? Released in 2005, Nicktoons Unite marked the first time we'd see our favourite characters join forces to stop a threat in video game form. And like I said, it certainly wasn't the last. The game must have been pretty good then, right?
Wrong!
Developed by Bluetongue and published by THQ, both well known for mostly producing licensed games, this adventure sees four villains from the Nicktoons universe coming together to form an evil syndicate and plot to take over their respective worlds. This syndicate consists of Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants, Vlad from Danny Phantom, Crocker from Fairly Odd Parents, and Professor Calamitous from Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. Seeing this unfold, Jimmy uses his technology to create an interdimensional portal and gathers together the heroes of each of these worlds, obviously being SpongeBob, Danny, and Timmy. Once united, they all head off to each of their worlds to confront the villains and stop their doomsday plan. This story is simple, but it's perfect for what they needed to do. It was the best method of getting all these characters together, and not only do we get to see the heroes team up, but also the villains. It's great. What's also pretty stellar is the voice acting and dialogue. The best part of a crossover like this is seeing a ton of your favourite characters get the chance to interact with one another, and it's done wonderfully here. One example being at the end of the ghost prison level, where SpongeBob realizes the whole time that they were fighting ghosts and freaks the hell out, clearly not realizing that Danny is also a ghost.
If this is a ghost zone, then those things before, they must have been...
It can be hard to take all these characters, who in their own shows are the leads, and have them all take the spotlight but still work off each other well. And they succeed at this by giving each character their own role to play within the team. Jimmy is the genius leader, Danny is the good-hearted tough guy, Timmy is the young kid eager to get into the action, and SpongeBob is the goofball comic relief. Their unique personalities makes them work off each other really well. It almost seems like these characters were made to meet each other. But Mark, why are you saying nothing but positives? I thought you said the game was bad. Yeah, I'm getting to that, straw man. Because built around this neat story and great characters is an actual game, and not a very good one. This game works a lot like Sonic Heroes in the sense that you're controlling multiple characters at once, that you can switch through to utilize each of their unique abilities. Only difference is Sonic Heroes is good. Yeah, I said it. It takes you to 4 different levels from the TV shows. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you'll be singing a different tune when you find out that every level is like an hour long. Just doing the same monotonous puzzles and platforming for an hour straight. So exciting. The characters all control around the same. You can run, or at least jog, use an attack, ground pound, and jump. The variety comes in with the character specific abilities. Danny can go ghost and possess enemies, Jimmy can shut out flares, Timmy can freeze things, and SpongeBob can summon frickin' Doodle Bob. You know, stuff like that. Each hero has a few special powers, and they're used to figure out basic puzzles within the levels. It can be kind of fun at times, but then you find yourself repeating these same few puzzles over and over again until your mind becomes completely numb to it. I feel like this game would be a lot more interesting if the marathon-like stages were instead separated into smaller levels, each of which focused on a specific character ability. You can upgrade your powers through different Goddards, scattered throughout the levels, but they don't really make much of a difference. This is also the only way you gotta save your game, so if you're getting bored and want to turn off the game, you'd better hope you find a Goddard soon, or you'll be playing the game for another while until you get to one. Other than special powers, each character also has a melee or range attack, with SpongeBob and Danny using their hands, and Timmy and Jimmy using guns. Cartoon guns, that is.
Don't make me pull this trigger. Cut a blast.
Although it does create an interesting concept in my head. These attacks help you agonizingly slog through enemy fodder, which the game has you doing constantly. And I mean, constantly. What's the challenge here? Not falling asleep? What a shitload of fuck. Oh yeah, it comes from trying to get the AI away from enemies in time because for some reason characters can lose health and die even when you're not playing as them. You shouldn't find yourself dying too often though, so lives are a complete non-issue. The only part that even comes close to being challenging are the boss fights, which are honestly the best part of the game. They're nothing spectacular and they can go on for a little too long at times, but they require you to use your abilities to open up their weak points so you can attack. They're kind of fun. You know what's not fun though? This music. Hands down the worst aspect of this game though is the presentation. Let's start with the graphic. For being cartoons that all have distinct and unique art styles, well, Butch Hartman's shows withstanding, these locations are so incredibly dull and blend together despite all these cartoons looking so different. Amity Park, dull and blocky. Dimsteel, hope you like bronze. Bikini Bottom, a little better, but it gets very repetitive as it mostly takes place in Jellyfish Fields and Plankton's lab, but it's nowhere near as vibrant and colourful as the show, or even other SpongeBob games. And finally, Retroville. Since his world is already the main hub, Jamie's level involves the characters shrinking down and going inside Goddard to destroy a flea bot that Calamitous is using to spy on them with. It's just a generic factory level and... Oh, hi Goddard! What are you doing here? Inside Goddard. Even beyond the locations, the way these characters look and move is just so boring. They have 4 or 5 stock animations that they each cycle through in every single scene. This also causes the lip syncing to not match up at all, so to get around this they use these text boxes instead with 2D artwork of the characters and... I don't like the way 2D Jimmy looks at me. At least they've got their priorities straight. I mean, who needs animation? Clearly not me. I'm sure they put their priorities somewhere. In the sound design, maybe?
Patrick, watch out for that jellyfish harvester!
How is this at all acceptable? Not only is the level music this really smooth jazz that you can barely hear, but in the cutscenes it just doesn't play any music at all, making their lack of sound effects really damn noticeable. And the ones that do play. This may as well be a silent film. I'm so genuinely baffled at the fact that they thought it was okay to release the game like this. I really shouldn't be shocked though. Apparently a ton of content was cut from the game, like this title screen, and code that implies characters like Sheen and Vicky were going to appear in some form. Although apparently they did have some time to insert costumes for each of the characters. You can unlock these from having other Nickelodeon games in your memory card. Did you know about this? It was almost impossible to find any images of it online. I wish I could say the positives outweigh the negatives, but no, not really. If you like the few good things I mentioned, like the writing and character interactions, well, too bad, because there's only a handful of scenes in the entire game. Whatever, I spent enough time ranting about this game, you can probably tell my thoughts on it. Overall, while it had a few interesting concepts such as the power-ups, a cool story, and occasional fun interaction, it's all brought down through the abysmal presentation and boring repetitive gameplay. I'm kinda sad the story was wasted on a game like this. It would have made for a much better movie, akin to something like the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours. Speaking of which, something interesting about this game is that they reference the events of the Jimmy Timmy specials at multiple points, meaning this game is canon. SpongeBob has canonically met Jimmy Neutron, and I think that's pretty amazing. And this continuity was pushed into the next game, 2006's Nicktoons Battle for Volcano Island. This was one of the first games I ever got for my PS2 and I adored it. I would replay it over and over again until one day I lost it. And when I asked my dad, he said he'd traded it back to the game shop without telling me. So the next day we went and bought it again. This game upped the production with a greater amount of locations, characters, and bosses, all built around a plot featuring this wise old crab summoning the 9 chosen ones to stop the Magu, this giant purple guy who just escaped from prison. He breaks the summoning circle which scatters the 9 heroes across the island, but conveniently SpongeBob and Danny land right in front of the crab. They're then tasked with gathering the heroes together and stopping the Magu from using his ooze to take over the world. These heroes are SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Squidward, Danny, Sam, Tucker, Timmy, and Jimmy. And once they're all rescued, they save the residents of the island and put a stop to the Magu. It's a bit more out there and doesn't really have anything to do with the cartoons, but I appreciate them trying to do something new. Each of these games could have easily just been, "Oh no! Calamitous has teamed up with the villains again! Got a blast!" My only real issue with the story is the characters that were chosen. Like, did we really need 4 SpongeBob and 3 Danny Phantom characters? And despite having 9, only 6 of the chosen ones are playable, with Tucker being their science guy, Squidward just disappearing until the final boss, and Jimmy isn't even there in person. When they find Timmy, he uses a communicator to call Jimmy, so he can help them find out what the Magu's up to, and tell him how to get off the island. But Tucker was already the science guy, why was Jimmy needed? Or better yet, remove Tucker because we don't need another Danny Phantom character and bring back Jimmy to be playable. Why didn't Jimmy get sent anywhere? I don't know, screw him I guess. It's so strange that they decided that the arguable leader of the team from the last game shouldn't even be there in person. There's concept art showing Jimmy with the gang, so I'm guessing he was cut from the game and was demoted to an exposition machine. I don't know why I'm so mad about this, I've never even seen his show. Let's just move on to the actual game before I have a heart attack over Jimmy Neutron. The gameplay is about the same as Nicktoons Unite, albeit much more polished. You can still switch between the available characters to traverse through each of the 10 levels, although now you don't have to worry about the other characters dying while you're not playing as them. You can now double jump, making platforming much easier, and they've removed the character specific abilities, and in place there's now a ranged attack for every character. For example, SpongeBob shoots out a bubble, Timmy uses Cosmo Wanda to shoot a star, and so on. You can fill up your attack meter with these yellow items, and increase your health with the blue ones. While getting rid of the character abilities has made it much more of a straightforward platformer, I don't find the ranged attacks a suitable trade-off, as they barely do any damage to the enemies, and it removes the uniqueness of the heroes, with them all now basically being the exact same, so it mostly comes down to preference for who you play as. When the game lets you, that is. See, because there are only 10 stages with 6 characters, not all of them are playable for an equal amount of time. Hope you didn't like Timmy Turner because you can only play as him for a grand total of 1 stage. I don't get why they didn't just let you play as any character you wanted to, or at least after you beat the game give you the option to. Because of the large amount of characters, it also lessens the amount of time they have to interact with one another, since more time needs to be devoted to each of them. It's a shame because the writing was my favourite thing about Unite, and this game has some neat interactions, but it's nowhere near as good. One thing I do like, however, is that the game likes to fixate on SpongeBob and Danny being the main characters. They're the first characters you play as, you can only play as them in the hub world, they take on the final boss together. It could have been easy for them to use Timmy instead of Danny, considering the Fairly Odd Parents was Nick's second most popular show at the time. But I'm glad they didn't do that. SpongeBob and Danny work off each other really well. The first level features the two of them exploring their new surroundings and talking with one another, and it works really well. But that's really where my main issue with the game comes in, and that's the pacing. The events and conflicts go by way too quickly. You just walk up to the crab for some info and he's like, oh, go here. Okay, now go over here. Alright, now go. Oh, wait, the game's over.
That was a bit anticlimactic.
They try to give off the vibe of the Nicktoons being stranded on an island, with them doing things like setting up camps in the hub, but they rush through it all way too fast, there's almost no room to breathe. It's kind of a blessing in disguise though. Unite had you doing the same things ad nauseum, so you got bored really quickly, but even though the gameplay is extremely similar to Unite, the levels are so much shorter that they usually end before you get the chance to be bored. Something this game does have plenty of though is fan service. When all the heroes fell from the sky, belongings from their world fell with them, so in each level you can come across and collect different salvage items for the characters, which are all referenced to the shows like Timmy's The Rulebook, SpongeBob's Spatula, etc. There are also references to other Nick shows, like Invader Zim's spaceship and house being in the background of some levels. It even calls back to the events of the previous game, like with Plankton's crab robot being among the wreckage in the first stage. Once you've collected all of a character's salvage items, it unlocks new levels, or bonus features you can access through the hub. Tucker's lets us rewatch cutscenes, Squidward's lets us look at concept art, and the 6 playable characters get extra time trial stages to play. It's a good reward for exploring the levels. You can also unlock bonus costumes, but instead of having to buy a completely different game to get them, you just have to find enough of a specific item in a level. This game has quite a bit of extra content, although it doesn't stop the game from only being around 2 to 3 hours long. It definitely could have been longer, but you know, budgets and stuff. Maybe they decided to put their budget into other things like presentation. Please? I don't want to witness 2D Jimmy again. Well, I can thankfully say that the graphics in this are... alright. It's nothing amazing, but each stage looks cool and atmospheric. The character models are decent and we thankfully have fully voiced and animated cutscenes. The sound design has also seen a major boost in quality. Gone are the days of and now we have a bit more fitting sound effects. The music is also alright. There's some catchy tunes in here, especially the main theme, but it's nothing really to write home about. Speaking of things not worth writing home about, there are a handful of bosses in the game, 2 of which just come out of nowhere. You just go up to the crab and he's like, oh yeah, there's this other villain I never told you about, go kill him. Something I can appreciate is how they all try to stand out from one another. The first has you take on this sand monster using these slingshots to destroy his shell, then the next just consists of you punching this guy for 10 seconds before he drops, then the next is against this plant king and you have to destroy his vines to get up to his face, and finally there's the final boss fight. The boss takes place over the course of an entire stage of this floating junk pile, where he pops up in the background to taunt and throw enemies at you. Then when you finally get to him, it's so underwhelming, you just have to shoot him continuously with your weapon. After this, the Magu gets sucked into a portal and Volcano Island is saved. It's probably just nostalgia talking, but I still think this game is okay despite its issues. Sure, it's really short and it's nothing more than a generic platformer, but it's still got a great atmosphere and fun gameplay. So if you're a fan of these shows, then I'd say check it out. You can do a lot worse than this game. A whole lot worse. The game concludes with Jimmy sending Nicktoons back to their worlds, until they inevitably have to meet again. And meet again they did, in the 2007 game Nicktoons Attack of the Toybots, the game that focuses on our heroes getting lost in a toy factory. Yep, they sure weren't running out of ideas by this point. Professor Calamitous, this time not joined by other villains, is trying to win the biggest genius award, and so to prove his brilliance is using furries, Krabby Patties, and ghost energy to power his new evil Toybots. He has also kidnapped all the Nicktoons from their worlds, and clothed them into evil robots. They soon meet one of Calamitous' workers, Chadbot. He informs him of the professor's evil plan, and strikes a deal with Jimmy, being that he will help them with their mission if they help him grow his collection of heroes' master models. With the help of Chadbot, the Nicktoons rescue all the stolen heroes and put a stop to his evil scheme. It's your run-of-the-mill platformer story, go to A to put a stop to B while rescuing C, but like Unite, I think this game's story is mostly enhanced by the writing. There's a lot of fun moments in here, like when they first meet up with Jimmy, or Tak pretending to use his powers to open a door so he can impress SpongeBob and Patrick. Oh yeah, that's right, Tak was a thing. With Nick airing its brand new show Tak and the Power of Juju, I guess they thought it would help with promotion to have him team up alongside the other Nicktoons. He even took over Timmy's place in the box art. But other than him, the other playable characters are the same from the other games. SpongeBob, Patrick, Danny, Sam, Timmy and Jimmy. Sandy has been removed, but I doubt anyone was that upset about it. Less SpongeBob characters is a good thing in my opinion, he already gets his name in the title. However, there are some optional unlockable characters you can play as, such as XJ9, Stimpy, Gurr, and Rocco. None of them have any story relevance, but it's neat to see some of their older and more forgotten shows get some time to shine. You unlock them the same way you get the master models, by finding character-specific tubes in a level, completing their challenge, then getting sent to this Invader Zim-inspired room to rescue them. Although it's clear who the developer's preference for these, as SpongeBob, Danny, and Tak each get unique gameplay styles for these sections with a cool little intro animation, but the other characters just get a short platforming puzzle that's no different from the rest of the gameplay. And how is that gameplay? Is it as boring as Unite, or as less boring as Volcano Island? It's somewhere in the middle, I'd say. This game's shtick is trapping you in a small area, making you do some precise platforming to get to the end, then sending you to the next small area. Rinse and repeat for 20 minutes until the level's done. The platforming can be fun, it's pretty challenging at times. That mostly comes from the cheapness, with most obstacles being a one-hit kill, and when you die it usually sends you all the way back to the beginning. Combat is a much smaller focus in this game, with it being basically unchanged from Volcano Island, except each character now uses the same ranged attack instead of the unique ones from the last game. I find these a lot more effective though, as you can use more than 5 shots at a time. It's useful for plowing through the rows of generic toy-themed robots the game throws at you. They keep building up these really cool robot designs. It's even on the box art, but they only end up being in 2 stages where you're riding a mech, so you don't even get the opportunity to properly fight them. Oh, that's right, the mech stages. So Jimmy has the genius idea of using mechs to destroy the robots. So we get 2 entire levels where you just walk around and shoot out green slime. On the PS2 version, you have to point the right analog stick in the direction you want to shoot, but there's no reason for you not to just keep shooting endlessly because you have infinite ammo. These stages are probably the worst part of the game. Well, you did say you only had to do it for 2 levels. At least you don't have to do it for that long. And I'd be saying the same thing, Strawman. Except there are only 7 levels in this game. You go through Bikini Bottom, 2 factory stages, Amity Park, another factory stage, Fairy World, and then the Professor's Lair, each of which lasts around 20 minutes, making this the shortest Nicktoon game yet. The game ends before it feels like it even had the chance to begin, and I wouldn't mind as much if they didn't try to artificially extend the length by making you unable to progress to certain levels without collecting enough master models, meaning you have to backtrack to replay levels you already went through. It is good, however, that they let you go to whatever section of the level you want, and tell you what hero you'll need for the master model. It's also good that they finally let you choose whatever character pairing you want for a level, but I guess it was kinda necessary in a game where there are almost twice as many characters as there are levels. The graphics are about on par with Volcano Island. Not bad, but nothing too amazing. For mostly taking place within a factory, they do a good job at making them stand out from one another, with each section having a unique aesthetic, like race cars, more girlish toys, space toys. It's interesting stuff. The soundtrack for this game is also surprisingly great. With Unite and Volcano Island I can remember 1, maybe 2 songs, but I can remember almost all of this soundtrack. The Toy Factory levels have a nice electro swing vibe. Looks like Nick was doing it before it was cool. And this game has my favourite Bikini Bottom theme, topping even the one from the beloved Battle for Bikini Bottom. The guy who did the OST for this game went on to do the soundtrack for Doom 2016 and Wolfenstein games, so he's got quite the resume. I wanna love this game, I really do. It excels at fan service, with the master models each being a character from a previous Nick show, like the hit Back to the Barnyard. And all the dialogue that the characters exchange are really fun, but this game is just so shallow that it's barely worth talking about. There aren't even any boss fights. They could have easily let you face off in some epic battles against your Toybot doppelgangers. But no, there's not even a final fight. Look at this! This is the last part you play before the credits roll, and it's just the same as the rest of the crappy mech levels. After this, the Nicktoons face off against Calamitous, only to realise they're on the set of the biggest Genius Award ceremony, where it's revealed that Chadbot won because he has the most master models. The end. What was the point in any of this? Yes, I'm getting angry over a children's game. What of it? I'm doing a lot of complaining, but it's only because I can see glimpses of a great game here. I find the moments where you're platforming through the Toy Factory fun and challenging, but it's constantly being brought down by the shoehorned in mech levels, dickish design, and only clocking in at around 2 hours of total gameplay. I'm so disappointed because this is my favourite of the 4 when I was a kid. But maybe it'll pick up in quality for the epic finale, 2008's SpongeBob SquarePants featuring Nicktoons, Globs of Doom. Aw, they're not friends anymore. Oh no, what happened? You could tell at this point they were getting really desperate for seals. Look at how little focus they put in the Nicktoons in the title. I don't know if I should be worried about this. The game opens with SpongeBob during a regular Bikini Bottom day, when an evil force comes in and takes over. SpongeBob is then greeted by Jimmy Neutron, who tells him what's been happening and uses a portal to take him to... Haven't I seen this somewhere before? Apparently this orange goop has been falling from the sky, and is turning anyone who touches it into a mindless drone. Once at the Magu lair, Jimmy equips the team with weapons that will help them take on the Morphoids, and find out what's been going on. This new team consists of SpongeBob, Jimmy, Danny, Tack, Invader Zim, Plankton, Dib, Technus, Beautiful, Gorgeous, Tralloc. Who?
Who are you people?
So basically, for every hero, they also have a villain from their world to team up with. I don't really know why, they don't do a good job at explaining it, but it causes this roster to be really underwhelming. This forced rule of needing a villain means they had to get rid of characters like Timmy, because they didn't want you running around as an old man, I guess. So no Timmy, Nick's second most popular show, yet Tack is still here. Still pushing for that show to do well, are we? They have a couple cutscenes of them talking to each other and making references to the shows, but it doesn't have much of an impact because who the hell cares about the villain from Tack? How about this Jimmy Neutron woman I didn't even know existed until this game? I feel like this roster would be a lot more interesting if they just kept it to the main 4 heroes and villains from Unite. It would be neat to see them all have to team up together. But the choices for Globs of Doom are so bizarre. The only good addition are Zim and Dib, who are really great in this game. The fan service is also neat. I like how the main hub takes place within the volcano from Battle for Volcano Island, and the wise little crab is back to give us tutorials, although he has a different voice this time. As for the gameplay, it's kind of a mix between all 3 games that came before. You've got the wide open worlds of Unite, the simple platforming of Volcano Island, and the 2 playable characters of Toybots. You'd think that would make for the best game yet. One of the best additions for this game is actually something I talked about with Unite. Instead of chucking you into one giant hour-long level for each world, they're actually split up into 2 smaller levels you can access from the hub. This makes the game a lot more casual to play, since you can just enter a level, play for 20 minutes, then you're done. It's just too bad that these levels are so goddamn boring. Something I can give the other games is that they at least have variety between each level. But with this, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Each character plays almost exactly the same, with the only difference being whatever weapon they were given at the start, which you can use by filling up your special meter. They all do the same thing though, stabilize the enemy for a bit so you can go attack them. And on top of the repetitive combat where you do nothing but fight the same minion looking enemies, there's really simple platforming segments that put up no challenge at all. There are 5 worlds in this game, with them all being locations from the characters' worlds. There's Bikini Bottom, Amity Park, Poo Poo Nunu, Retroville, and Zim's Town. Just Sim's Town. You kinda wrote yourself into a corner there, didn't you? The locations are probably the best part of the game. It's really fun to explore places like the Bikini Bottom Theatre, the Retroville theme park from the Jimmy Neutron movie, and Downey School. I just wish what they built around these cool locations were interesting. Like Unite, the best part of this game is probably the boss fights. They each have you take on a different character from the shows, while they're infected by the goo. There's Bubble Bass, Zur, the Girl-Eating Plant, and Ghost Dog. No Tack Boss though for some reason. They all require you to do something different in order to defeat them. They're all really creative and fun to play. I just wish I could say that about the rest of the game. Even beyond that, it can be really glitchy at times. There were at least 2 moments where for no reason at all my characters wouldn't turn, and were constantly sliding around the place. And damn Dib, they were right about you having a big head. The presentation is actually a big step up from the previous games. The models are a lot higher quality, although for some characters like Jimmy I wish they weren't. And Dib's eyes, I don't think they're supposed to look like that. And the stages are all really bright and colourful. Though if you were to play this game for whatever reason, I'd say go with the Wii version, as the lighting is kind of bad in the PS2. I don't want you looking at me like that, Tack. The music is also alright. Not as good as Toybots, but still, not bad. The game ends with the reveal that the goop was coming from Globulus Maximus, this giant piece of orange slime, who was born when the universe sneezed? After defeating him in a really easy, boring boss fight, we find out that this giant destructive entity who almost killed all of us is just a bit lonely. What is this, a Steven Universe villain? Stop! So the heroes encourage him to spend out the rest of his days as SpongeGlob. Because even giant world-destroying beings love SpongeBob, airing weekdays on Nickelodeon. Please watch. They try to have the villains turn one over on the heroes, which leads to another really easy, boring boss, where you control SpongeGlob as he beats up the villain ship. And then the game just kinda ends after that. Like, it literally just puts the end on screen. This game kinda sucks. It's a disappointing end to the series. The other games weren't anything great, but I was at least able to have some fun with them. It offers you nothing unless you really want to explore the locations from these shows. This game ended up doing so poorly that the developers had to shut down after its release. Which is a shame, since I doubt we're going to get anything like this ever again. A lot of people say something like this couldn't work again because most of the shows from them have been long cancelled. But that never stopped them before. Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, Invader Zim, all these shows were cancelled way before some of these games came out. The truth is, these characters are still well known and beloved by millions of people, and more games featuring them alongside SpongeBob would do nothing but increase public interest in them again. So it worked for me. I only started watching shows like Danny Phantom because of these games. And let's face it, what shows could Nick even use for another Nicktoons Unite? SpongeBob teaming up with Lincoln Loud and a Ninja Turtle. It's just not the same. I may be incredibly nostalgic for these 4 games, but I'm not going to sit here and try to act like they're anything more than what they are. Crappy license games. But that's kind of what I like about them. But who knows? You know, we still got Cartoon Network Battle Crashers over here. Maybe that game could be there to fill the void. You know, I think I now have a newfound appreciation for Globs of Doom. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 has just been officially announced after being leaked for the past month, with everyone who cried that the first one fell off and is dead now back on the hype train, only to inevitably do the same thing when this one releases and doesn't sell 100 billion units. I love the internet. No, I was not one of these people. I love the original Nick All-Star Brawl. I have like 20 hours on it on Steam and only stopped playing because I literally left the country and my computer with it. But with this second game right around the corner, I fear that the internet's short-term memory will result in them forgetting what happened with the first one and repeat those same actions again, with the unfortunate consequence being the series yet again being nothing more than a mere punchline. If you are not aware for some reason, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl was a platform fighting game akin to the likes of Super Smash Bros. When it was announced back in 2021, everybody was ecstatic. Not only because it was yet another game featuring all our favorite Nickelodeon characters, most of our favorite Nickelodeon characters. The main intrigue here seemed to be from who was making it, not necessarily its publisher Game Mill, who honestly don't have the best track record, instead being from Ludosity, with them being well known in the fighting game community for making the small but addicting Slap City. With a group of developers who evidently cared a great deal about the platform fighter genre, it gave a lot of folks the confidence to assume that Nick All-Star Brawl would be a similar experience, just with Nick characters. And then the memes hit. Everybody was making jokes and images and posts about how good the game was going to be, until the ball continued to roll and it was eventually dubbed the Smash Killer, that it would blow that game out of the water and Sakurai will be crying himself to sleep over how epic SpongeBob vs. Nigel Thornberry is. And while this started out as a simple joke, it was thrown around so much that I think it built up this resentment towards the game, with Smash players getting sick of this phrase being touted so frequently and having a negative stigma towards the game as a result, which isn't all that good for marketing when the folks who enjoy Smash Brothers are very likely to be in the same demographic of who would also enjoy a game like yours. And because the game, of course, couldn't live up to the ungodly expectations a Smash competitor has, it was seen as being dead on arrival. So with the upcoming release of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, I wanted to take this time to discuss what I thought worked about the original, what was missing, and if I think this game will succumb to. But first, you want to know what's the real dilemma here? That you're not playing the hit mobile RPG Dislight. This video is sponsored by Dislight. Dislight takes place in this rad, stylish, futuristic universe, where huge portal-like structures have fallen onto cities of the world that grant powers from ancient gods from Greek, Chinese, Egyptian, and Japanese folklore, along with way more. With a bunch of diverse characters, you're bound to encounter a character who embodies everything you love, whether it be the fierce motorcycle-riding Odeon or creatures like Haiti. Dislight has just launched their new Endless Summer update, where for a limited time you can immerse yourself in the captivating story of Geo2, a classic Chinese god, where you can participate in various summer-themed events to earn massive rewards. There's also this super relaxing auto battle mode, which makes it incredibly easy to grind for prizes without even needing to check your phone. So with all that and more, why wouldn't you go to the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to download Dislight, and use my code FIGHTWITHGODS to get 5 free draws and massive in-game rewards. Fight with gods and fight for infinite possibilities. And thanks again to Dislight for sponsoring this video. Now, the first thing you may be wondering to yourself, as I've seen many a folk across the internet asking this, but why is this getting a sequel? Wasn't the original, like, a massive failure? No. Not really. Now that we have sales figures and movie box offices readily available to us, I think it's never been easier for a consumer to think they know what's considered a success or a flop. Or, I guess, in Twitter slang, what is peak and what is a flop. Throw the word mid in there as well, perfect. Nintendo specifically have been on their A-game recently when it comes to sales figures. It seems like every time they release something pertaining to their iconic franchises, we are always hearing about how it sold more copies than any other game in the series at that point. Look at Pokemon, Mario, Zelda, and most importantly here, Super Smash Bros. With Ultimate selling around 30 million copies, probably past that at this rate. Because of that, it's super simple to look at something that doesn't do anywhere near those numbers and deem it a failure, when that in and of itself feels to consider all the other factors at play. You know, it's like if two movies came out. For the sake of comparison, I want to use Sonic the Hedgehog and Detective Pikachu as examples. Quality aside, the Sonic movie had a box office result of $300 million worldwide, with Detective Pikachu blowing that out of the water with $430 million. Given Pikachu's box office being over $100 million greater, it would be safe to assume that it was the bigger hit profits-wise. But only one of these two films got a sequel. And that's because it fails to account for the budget. When you take a further look at the budget for both of these films, Sonic is at a modest $90 million, whereas Detective Pikachu is almost double that at $150 million. A common rule online is to take the production budget and double it to account for marketing costs. So if we use that, we end up with Sonic at $180 million and Pikachu at $300 million, meaning that both roughly made around $120 to $30 million profit. So you have Sonic making a similar profit, but at way less cost. And with that movie being so tiny in scope, and Pikachu being this massive story with various locations and hundreds of Pokemon on screen, it's safe to assume that a second Sonic movie which ups the stakes of the first would do better. And I think Nick All-Star Brawl 2 is in a similar boat. Not that it made similar profits to Smash, let's be real here, but if you look at the original game, it's tiny. 20 characters versus Smash's 4,000, 20 stages versus Smash's 5 million. It doesn't even have the 40-hour long campaign. It's like going to a 5-star restaurant versus fucking Popeyes. But that's quite alright because I like Popeyes. Because of this, Nick All-Star Brawl had to sell way less copies to be deemed a success by Nickelodeon. You really think... You really think Brian Robbins is sitting there like, "Aw, shucks, our game didn't sell as well as the one with Mario, Sonic, Sora, and fucking Minecraft Steve"? Of course not! He's probably ecstatic that it made them more than 35 cents in a bottle cap. It's all relative. If you were to ask someone higher up at Nickelodeon, they would probably tell you the first game was a massive success. So much so that they made DLC for it, and, oh I don't know, are making a sequel! It makes complete sense for it too. There's like 3 of those kart racing games. You really think those sell as well as Mario Kart? Nobody would be making them if that were the case, because you cannot compete. You know you can play more than one of any genre, right? Ugh, why the fuck would I play that Sonic shit when Mario Bros already came out 60 years ago? Other than kids and Nickelodeon fans, the main demographic for this series would not only be for Smash fans, but people who want to play Smash, but may not own a Switch. With it being locked off to one console, there are 3 whole other platforms out there who would kill for a game like Smash Brothers. So I don't see an issue with these games coexisting. Why does one need to kill the other? And that's not to say Nick All-Star Brawl is perfect. Believe me, it is not. But with this sequel, it appears that Ludosity, yet again, are putting all the love and care they can into making this the best game it can be within their time and budget. For example, my biggest issues with the original game were... Okay, aside from him, was how little content there was. I didn't mind how relatively small the roster was because it was filled with smart picks. Out of the represented franchises, the only strange decision I could think of was not including Arnold along with Helga. And then there were some obvious franchises being left out like Tak and the Power of Juju, Otis from Barnyard, hell even Fanboy and Chum Chum. Not super beloved characters or anything, I'm aware, but you can't help but think that the 2000s were severely underrepresented. It was only really Danny and Avatar, with the later additions of both Jenny and Hugh somewhat making up for that. Although, I guess that goes to show how popular the 2000s era is, considering these are 2 of the 3 DLC characters. But even then, where's Jimmy? Hugh was solely chosen because of the memes, but it's just weird to me to not include the main character from an included franchise. Made it feel a little random in places. Now with Nick All-Star Brawl 2, they have the opportunity to include way more new characters. It won't be anything crazy, honestly, I doubt the number will go much above 30, but that gives them the chance to make it feel a bit more complete. You know, as long as it's not filled out with more SpongeBob, Avatar, or Ninja Turtle reps. As I said this, I remember we've already gotten another for SpongeBob with a potential 5th on the way, and our 5th and 6th in Ninja Turtles. Okay, great. Who knows if everyone from the last game is going to reappear? Everyone seems to think this shouldn't be a concern, but with how vague they were about it in interviews, I'm sure at least 1 or 2 won't be coming back. But I'm really hoping this roster isn't just going to be filled out with characters from franchises already represented here. Fuck it, give me Movie Sonic. He's under Viacom just like Garfield, why not? Surprise me. Really happy to also see a variety of alternate skins for characters, with us seeing a Band Geeks and Artist Unknown alt for Squidward in the trailer. The original was so rushed it had none, and when they updated them in, they were mainly just... hat. So you can really tell I heard people loud and clear when they complained about the lack of features that should be obvious in a fighting game, especially with the announcement of a roguelike story mode where Vlad from Danny Phantom is the villain, complete with boss fights and fully voiced dialogue. Reminds me of the Nicktoons Unite days. Although I hope when you beat Vlad at the very end you unlock him as another fighter. I'd be pretty shocked if he were delegated to a boss fight. Another complaint were the movesets, with a lot of animations being super unclear. Like SpongeBob would clap his hands up, but that's a down attack, or they'd be so quick you can't even tell what's happening. Along with having light, medium, and strong attacks. Cool on paper, but kinda overwhelming when trying to learn a new character, especially when there's not much differentiation between them other than the damage going up higher. Every character kinda felt the same in a way, like they could have been interchangeable bar a few specific moves. Also, I'm not much of a fighting game guy, but the gameplay seems to be a huge step up. Like the developers actually have the time to expand upon what worked about the original. Introducing character-specific special moves and this meteor, which I don't know what it's gonna do, but I'm sure it'll do something. Stuff like this will hopefully make All-Star Brawl 2 stand apart from your average Smash clone, while not making the player think the game would be just more fun by just copying Smash Bros. So I'm particularly excited after I saw the developers saying they revamped just about every move in the game. Hope it was for the better. On top of that, they also added a bunch more flashy particles and effects to moves now, making the impact of each character feel a lot more specific, even if in an artificial way. Also, can I just say, it looks great. The original looked fine, but a little bland on the lighting side, but the shadows and lighting are vastly improved here. Not AAA or anything, but for a licensed game task of turning primarily 2D characters into 3D models while still capturing the charm, they did a pretty good job. Danny and Patrick specifically, they looked really weird in the original. Now, here's what we really want to know here. What will truly make or break this game? It's the roster. And so far, I genuinely have no idea who's going to be in, other than Jimmy and Squidward, obviously. There's a YouTuber called Papagino, who as far as I know correctly predicted Rocco as the final DLC character in the first game, who claims that the same source has showed him the full roster, or at least a wide variety of newcomers. And from reading a couple of developer interviews, it really seems like no matter what, this roster is going to be interesting. I keep hearing rumblings of strange, bizarre choices. Good or bad, we'll have to see. Personally, I really want to see Tak or Otis like I said before, but really I have no clue. The trailer does give us a couple hints of what new characters we're going to be seeing, however. There's another Avatar, SpongeBob, and Lighthouse stage present, which implies more reps from those series. No Fairy World, though. Okay, no wait, let's talk about that. So the thing I've been seeing everywhere for the past 2 years is that Nickelodeon doesn't own the rights to the Fairly Odd Parents, and that's why Timmy can't be in the game. And I want to call bullshit? Sure, Nelvana owns the international distribution rights for the first 5 seasons of Fairly Odd Parents, meaning it didn't air on Nick in certain countries. But like, where the fuck have you been? Timmy Turner has been in Nick games for decades. Who knows what happened? Maybe when Nickelodeon bought the rights to season 6 through 10, it kind of tempered whatever relationship they had with Nelvana. Who knows? But what I do know is, that doesn't mean Timmy can't be in the game. It just means Nick has to actively license him out. This is all assumption, by the way. Who knows what's going on? This is just my thoughts. I heard around the grapevine that Jimmy Neutron had a similar issue. Not sure what company specifically, but if I were to guess, I'd say O Entertainment, where Nick had to go through them to use Jimmy. And while of course they'd go through that extra effort when the show was still running to promote it, after the series was cancelled and became less relevant, there was less need for them to bother when they could just, I don't know, use Lincoln Loud. However, whenever they saw all the memes and outcry for Hugh Neutron to be in the first game, they saw potential, and more specifically, profit, and going through those extra steps to put him in the game. And I think it's telling that Jimmy Neutron has just now started popping up in all these Nick game celebrations again that once excluded him, like now being in Nick Racers 3 and the upcoming All-Star Brawl 2. I think with Timmy, it might be a similar thing. The series was cancelled back in 2017 with little to no fanfare, so why would they continue using him in crossovers, especially when they have to go through Nelvana to even do so? So, if my assumption is correct, Timmy can theoretically be in the game. Nick just needs to feel like it's worth going through the extra trouble. So I'm praying that with this upcoming CGI reboot, they'll see it as being worthwhile so we can once again reunite the original Nicktoons gang. Also, now that the first game was a proven success, I'm sure Nick would be more willing to give the team more budget to try and go for these more harder to obtain characters. But hey, only time will tell. Gonna play the game no matter what. But I'm really happy so far to see that the devs are solely focusing on their own community and making it the best game they can be, instead of trying to be a Smash Bros. Competitor like all these people wanted it to be at first. All this comes back to what I said at the beginning. You can't compete with Nintendo. They invented this shit, so I'm more than glad to see them implement all these new features to try and make them stand out. The first game was crippled from its monumental expectations. Now that people aren't as willing to call it the next Smash Brothers, I'm hoping that it will allow it to stand on its own for people to realize that it can be fun in its own right, too. Either way, hashtag justice for Timmy, come on, please.
Thanks, boy genius.
No problem. dumbass. Remember cartoon crossovers? It's weird, I feel like we never see them done anymore, at least not in the scale they once were. You got the Simpsons and the Critic crossover, the Steven Universe Uncle Grandpa one that made everybody really mad but I actually think is really funny, or the Family Guy Simpsons special. I like to forget about that one. The last one I can really remember happening on a larger scale was the Supernatural Scooby-Doo event. But even then, one of those shows wasn't even animated. I'm not sure why studios don't see much value in doing these as much anymore. Perhaps it's a result of most shows now getting cancelled after 1 or 2 seasons, and so they can't guarantee both shows will still be on the air by the time of its release. Boy, I sure do love the current state of the animation industry. But if you're not a platform fighter or cheaply made chibi shorts with no voice acting, ew, then you're not going to be seeing many crossovers in this day and age. Which is a shame, because they're cool. I mean, do I even need to explain why? It's fun and exciting to see characters that you never thought could ever meet come together to share screen time, getting to explore each other's worlds. For a kid, it makes you feel like anything is possible. It's insane. Those 2 shows that I watch, at least for a short period of time, are allowed to become one. And none blew me away more than the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours, which saw the main characters of the Fairly Odd Parents and the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, God, you couldn't have picked a shorter name, swapping dimensions and having to find a way to get back home.
Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Timmy Turner.
In my opinion, Nickelodeon in the mid-2000s were the kings of crossing over their many iconic franchises. Of course, we have the holy grail of cartoon crossovers, the Nicktoons Unite saga, which saw SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, and Timmy Turner, sometimes more, Timmy also got fucked in the last one, banding together to take down either their respective villains or an entirely new threat that wants to take over the multiverse. One of my favorite aspects of that series was how they didn't reset between games. You know, once all these guys were introduced to each other, they continued to be aware of their existence, even filling in some of the newer Nicktoons that were introduced as the series continued.
Look, it's Timmy Turner! Look, it's Jimmy Neutron!
Jimmy Hootron?
Oh, he's a friend of ours. We go way, way back.
But that all started with the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, which aired on Nickelodeon in 2004. Sponsored by Cheetos for some reason. Not a whole lot is known about the behind-the-scenes development of this incredibly ambitious project, with the Fairly Odd Parents creator Butch Hartman claiming that the executives of Nickelodeon at the time specifically requested it, which was cool. You know, because of how obsessed I was with Nicktoons Unite at the time, I assumed that soon Nick would be releasing a crossover between SpongeBob and Danny Phantom to go along with it. But it never came. I can only assume Nick saw massive potential in this project due to the similarities between both shows. They're both polar opposites, but somehow managed to blend perfectly. You know, Timmy, Jimmy, one has magic, the other has science, one is 2D, the other's 3D. Sometimes the best ideas come from the oddest of places. Fairly Oddest. But this seemed like a massive undertaking, with both shows presumably being made under completely different pipelines. But I think what works so well about them is that they managed to use that to their advantage. Instead of trying to blend these 2 disparate series together, they instead embraced their differences, and chose to have it be more of a celebration of the 2 rather than a combining. Despite being, well, 2 years old, I fucking loved the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. And clearly I wasn't alone in that, with it doing so well that Nick not only ordered an immediate sequel, but also a threequel, resulting in a final special that, almost, acted as a finale to the Fairly Odd Parents. Didn't happen though. And so, fittingly, today I wanted to have a power hour of my own. I've had to train myself to not say par hour, to discuss in excruciating detail each and every one of these crossovers. Do they hold up as well as I remember? Are there elements that have aged poorly? Does Timmy still look horrible in 3D? The answer to all these questions is... yes.
Psst. Subscribe to the Sleep Channel for epic compilations to relax and sleep to. Thanks. Also subscribe, I appreciate it.
You know, I really wish there were more info about these specials online. Jimmy Neutron is in a strange place where its creators, Keith Alcorn and John A. Davis, are nowhere near the level as well known as someone like Butch Hartman. Maybe not for good reasons, albeit, but they seem so low profile comparatively. And so all we really have to go off of is Butch Hartman's word. And upon checking out his behind-the-scenes video on his YouTube channel, I was reminded of exactly what compelled me to make that rant video when I was 16. And it's that these videos have no fucking substance whatsoever. I've met Butch in person a couple times, one of those being for the interview I did. And one thing I certainly picked up on is that getting a detailed story from the man is near impossible. Like him or not, Butch has been involved in the animation industry for years, and by far has had the most extensive career out of anyone at Nickelodeon. You think he would have a plethora of cool and interesting stories to tell about the inner workings of having multiple shows on the air, during arguably Nickelodeon's peak. But no, everything is told in the most quick, safest way possible, like he's talking PR to you. Oh hey Butch, what was it like working on this thing? Oh, you know, it was a great project, everyone on it was super talented and amazing, it was a tough job and we had some complications, but it came out great and people loved it. Thanks. It's just like, I want to know more. How was it working with the Jimmy Neutron staff? How much of a challenge was it translating Timmy to 3D? What was the working environment like at Nickelodeon at the time? But you watch through his video and all he really says is, yep, we were told to make a crossover, it was cool, and everybody loved it. Yeah, thanks, I know that already.
Science and magic. Yeah, Jimmy's into science, he's into magic. I mean, are we idiots? We have to do this. And so we just kind of started talking, and when they threw it by the network, they're like, we should do that.
Wait, what? But dude, in your fucking video you said...
And one day, this word comes down from on high.
We'd like you to combine your show, The Fairly Odd Parents, with The Jimmy Neutron Show. Have a nice day.
Fucking liar, I don't know what to believe anymore. Anyways, the hype for this was insane. They were promoting the shit out of it. And you bet your ass they made a crappy Flash game to go along with it. Hell yeah. Anyways, with the first Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, I always thought it was really clever that they treated it less like a crossover and more of a switching realities gimmick. You know, what if Jimmy was in Timmy's place and Timmy was in Jimmy's place, having to deal with each other's usual problems? They set it all up in a pretty genius way too. And by genius, I mean simple, but hey, it works. With the upcoming Dimsdale Science Fair, Timmy, who still has yet to start his project, decides to wish himself in the greatest lab in the universe, which just so happens to be the lab of Jimmy Neutron. Which never really made sense to me because I always assumed they were from different universes, but whatever, if we want to pick apart the logic of the Nicktoons universe, I think you're watching this for the wrong reasons. After accidentally grabbing Timmy's auto poofer, which he's always had on person in every episode since the pilot, Jimmy is transported to the world of the Fairly Odd Parents, in which we just kind of forget about him for a bit. The story cleverly keeps the two worlds pretty separate. Once Jimmy is in Dimsdale, he's restricted to his own plot, and vice versa. Trying to find a way to combine these two worlds would have been way too much work to cover, and so I think it's smart that, in a way, both of these could cut together to create two standalone episodes of each other's show. You know, if you spliced all the Jimmy parts together and spliced all the Timmy parts together, it's almost like they could have released this as two special event episodes for each series. Like, what happened to Jimmy when he disappeared? Well, now you gotta watch the Fairly Odd Parents to find out. That would have been a fucking nightmare for reruns, though. Good they didn't go with that. The purpose of this special is more so to see each show's main character interact with the world of the other. And so we get to see Timmy explore Retroville and hang out with Jimmy's friends, while Jimmy is just kind of stuck on his own. I like that because of the switch-up, we get to see Timmy experience what it's like to be around normal, non-Butch Hartman-written individuals who have more than one character trait. Whereas Jimmy gets the opposite treatment. He gets to now assume Timmy's position, getting ignored by his parents, dealing with Vicky and all his classmates who are more obnoxious than ever, along with Mr. Crocker, who obviously notices that something is up, stealing his invention and using it to finally transport him to Fairy World. I can't believe such a major moment happened in the fucking Jimmy Neutron crossover. But comparatively, Timmy gets a pretty chill day out of it. Hanging out with Carl and Sheen, Cindy falls in love with him. It's only by the end when things start to fuck up with him installing a video game into Goddard that corrupts him, turning him into a giant monster who grows stronger with every defeat. I like that even in the Fairly Odd Parents world, Timmy's game is CG for some reason. Imagine if your video game looked better than real life. Oh.
I'm a fucking bad bitch at this game, son. Oh, god damn, the screen went black.
Also, I have to not question how Timmy's playing on what's clearly a Game Boy, yet the game is on a disc. It was always so dumb to me that nobody, except for Cindy, I guess, was able to tell that this wasn't Jimmy and that this wasn't Timmy. I guess it only goes to show the similarities in both of these series, writing half the secondary cast to be dumbasses. But even then, I think they somewhat get away from it. It doesn't take away from anything. You know, these are both characters who have previously turned themselves into a variety of stupid shit before, so it's not terribly out of the ordinary. Other than that, though, Goddard becoming a monster and Crocker invading Fairy World, most of this special is just allowing the characters to interact. Ironically, Timmy and Jimmy are the ones to get the least amount of screen time together. But can you imagine if this wasn't a 44-minute special and was restricted to being 22 or hell, even 11 minutes? I can't imagine it would be anywhere near as well remembered. I mean, just look at that OKKO crossover where he, Garnet from Steven Universe, Raven from Teen Titans Go, and Bantan from Bantan joined forces to save the Tooniverse. Despite the creator wanting it to be longer, the network would only give them 11 minutes. And so the entire thing, while cool, feels incredibly rushed like a proof of concept. There's no time to breathe. That's why I don't think we'll ever get anything on this kind of level again. Networks just aren't interested. Now that I think about it, though, it might be because every show now is just direct to streaming, and so if one show is bought by Netflix and then the other show gets dumped on HBO Max, which network will get the crossover? I don't know. Anyways, by far the most exciting prospect to having these shows crossover would have to be the animation. These two art styles couldn't be any more different. And so I'm sure it created major complications during production. It's probably why they decided to keep things small and only have the main characters switch worlds. Therefore, they only have to make a model of Timmy and a model sheet for Jimmy, that's it. Jimmy looks perfect in the Fairly Odd Parents art. He was translated to their style excellently, which means there's no way in hell Butch designed it.
My arms! My depth! It's gone!
Did you see how he reimagined other shows for a potential Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 4 he made for YouTube? Ugh.
And then Timmy, of course, I thought would just be a cute little bear.
Yeah, bear, not a beaver. There it is, Butch. I drew it for you. And look, there's you, just for fun. But yeah, Jimmy does not look out of place at all. Timmy, on the other hand. Okay, so the Jimmy Neutron team clearly had the tougher job here, having to translate Timmy's design with his extremely cartoony proportions to the world of 3D. And look, we can all agree it looks weird and kinda ugly, but at the same time, for all the bad I can say, I don't know, I kinda like it. Obviously, the biggest hurdles they had to cross here were characters' eyes, mouths, and body shapes. Something that the Jimmy Neutron team did not exclusively struggle with. I mean, just look at the live-action movies. But it took us until, like, a week ago to finally get Fairly Odd Parents characters that look good in 3D. That head shape is naturally just something hard to translate. Some could argue they didn't bother translating him at all. You know, they just made him in 3D as literally as possible based off his initial design instead of trying to get him to conform to the Jimmy art style. But I wouldn't agree with that at all. Really, the only thing that would give me that impression are his giant bulging eyes and eyebrows. The fact that their eyes come out of their head is a lot more noticeable when they're as big and squinty as Timmy's. Along with the fact that they still didn't bother giving him actual shoes, still opting for that weird pants thing Timmy wears. I don't even know how I would describe that. But you know, they evidently did make an effort to have him conform to the art style. Whether or not they succeeded, though, is up to you.
We've got to scour this town of evil.
I get it. You want to play one of those special games, eh?
What? They made him less sharp, you know, his hat droops over more. They bothered giving him proper irises and 5 fingers. Honestly, the thing that looks most off about him to me would have to be the colors. In promotional artwork, he looks fine, but in the actual episode, he's way too desaturated. His skin is so pale, and the colors don't pop nearly as much as they should.
See, Cindy, you'd still like me even if I weren't smart, wouldn't you? Of course not.
Wait, did you see that? Editor, play it again. No.
You'd still like me even if I weren't smart, wouldn't you?
What is going on there? It feels like I'm blinking. Slow it down.
Wouldn't you?
Huh. Anyways, I still think they did as good a job as they could of adapting him. Some would argue his mouth is a dead giveaway, but I think that's to forget that this is a mouth style that Jimmy Neutron characters have unfortunately had before. Just look at this freak. Even then, while Jimmy Neutron has admittedly aged pretty poorly visually, I still think it was incredibly impressive for the time, and the team consistently used it to show off what couldn't be done in 2D, like how much they loved their spinning camera shots by the end. Even better, I can tell exactly who's responsible for this, as a couple years back one of the animators shared their work on this special, and what do you know, there it is. This is super cool to see. You know what though, I'll never fucking get over how at the end, Timmy comes out of Goddard's mouth, but we get a close-up shot of it, and there's no hole. Where the fuck did he come out of? I think what the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour does best, however, is managing to show off both of these shows at the same time, while still not sacrificing the voice of either. The Jimmy Neutron segments still feel like Jimmy Neutron, while the Fairly Odd Parents segments still feel like Fairly Odd Parents. That may seem like such a non-point to bring up, but may I again draw your attention to The Simpsons Guy, which was so clearly written by the Family Guy staff, and therefore, all the Simpsons characters just feel kinda off. We have Homer basically just being Peter too. We have uncomfortable scenes like Lisa being shown a string of cuts down Meg's arm. Do I need to mention the rape joke? Hell, half of the Simpsons secondary cast weren't even in the crossover because their voice actor flat out refused to take part. I think a large part of this would have to go towards the sound design. They did a really good job at keeping each of their vibes alive, especially in the scenes where we see them talking to each other from their respective worlds. You know, we'll have Guy Moon sound effects cutting back from... Okay, who composed for Jimmy Neutron? See, this is what I'm talking about. Why do we know so much more about Fairly Odd Parents? Charlie Brissett. I'll sing it from the rooftops if I have to. I like the cue to the Oh Yeah Cartoons pilot when Cosmo and Wanda introduce themselves to Jimmy.
I'm Cosmo! And I'm Wanda!
I'm not one for mindless references being shoved into media, but the one exception I have is for crossovers, in which, go all out. That's the point. I've talked about it a bit before, but when I was growing up, Nickelodeon were rarely airing Jimmy Neutron, and so I was largely exposed to the series from these crossover episodes. But really, while watching, I only really knew about Fairly Odd Parents. Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen may as well have been Butch's own creations in my mind. So after finally having watched some of the series, I can now say that I'm really impressed with just how much of each show they managed to shove in. It must have been really cool as a kid getting to see Timmy Turner interacting with all Jimmy's inventions from previous episodes and even the movie. And seeing Jimmy talking to Cosmo and Wanda and going to Timmy's school was incredibly fun. I love when introducing himself he always has to say his full name.
I'm Jimmy Neutron. No, Jimmy Neutron. I'm Jimmy Neutron.
But there's a bunch of stuff I picked up on here, like the car that Vicky drives him in being the same one she steals from Timmy's dad in that one episode. Pretty sure this is also the first time we learn about the big wand, which powers all the magic in Fairy World. This started to appear a few more times in the rest of the series before being forgotten about. I think they pull something out of their ass later like, oh, it turns out that Crocker's the one powering Fairy World because he believes in fairies. Yeah, like that's not a fucking dumbass power source. Believing in a species that you're not allowed to let anyone know the existence of. What happens when Crocker drops dead? Answer me that. That's what I thought, asshole. And they even managed to throw in Timmy's long-forgotten catchphrase. Where he'd say, let's get, then some word that applies to the current predicament. I always liked that.
Let's get experimental.
I love this new smart-headed Jimmy.
I often see complaints about this special directed towards Timmy in particular, criticizing how annoying he is. He's pretty antagonistic towards a guy whose lab he just broke into. But I don't know, I think it works. I never liked crossovers where the main characters all become immediate best friends. There's so much more interesting conflicts to come out of them hating each other, having them build up to being friends at the end. Timmy and Jimmy are two incredibly strong personalities, and so it makes sense why they wouldn't like each other. Of course, Timmy wouldn't like a self-proclaimed boy genius, and obviously Jimmy wouldn't like a kid who's used to getting whatever he wants. Also, I'd argue that Timmy's assholishness tendencies are matched equally by Jimmy's pig-headedness. When he finds out Timmy saved Goddard, he's still more than willing to let Cosmo and Wanda die because he sees no value in them. But it works because it all comes together greatly with the ending, where both parties are able to recognize that just because they don't see value in something, that it doesn't mean somebody doesn't. Jimmy understanding that in the same way he can love Goddard, who isn't real, that Timmy can also love Cosmo and Wanda, who he thinks are mere computer programs. And so him deciding to suit up and use his wits to defend Fairy World is a really epic moment, genuinely. Much better than the boss fight they made out of this for Nicktoons Unite, that's for sure.
As long as that machine is draining fairy magic, we can't do anything to him. But we can make fun of his outfit. Nice pants.
The ending to this special is fantastic, with Timmy wishing he and Jimmy could once again switch places, and the two finally getting to meet on equal ground. Made even more impressive when you find out about how much the two animation teams struggled to get this handshake to work right, with the two shows being animated completely differently.
Jimmy Neutron, boy genius.
The epilogue is fun too, with Jimmy helping out Timmy by using Goddard for his science project. Although I don't know why she'd be impressed, I'd be fucking terrified if I saw this IRL, just look at him. Couldn't have been that hard to just draw a picture of Goddard, could it? But either way, everything is wrapped up nicely to what was at the time a massive event in cartoon history. There's so much good about this special. The art is so fun to look at, the concept of each character having to solve what the other does on a weekly basis is so fun, and I absolutely love that ending. And that's why I think this is the weakest of the three. Might be a controversial take, but I think the first Jimmy Timmy Power Hour is the worst. But not by much. Overall, I really enjoy all three of these, but I think what seriously hinders the first so much is that pacing issue I hinted at before. There is just too much of a break between each part, and I seriously can't tell why. There's so many moments here where you think they could have swapped over, but just don't. And the Jimmy half definitely gets it the worst. You really get the idea that this is more of a Fairly Odd Parents episode over Jimmy Neutron. We start with Timmy, and with Timmy. Timmy is the only one with an ongoing conflict. Really, it's just Timmy needing to solve a problem and getting wrapped up with the Jimmy Neutron cast while trying to fix it. Jimmy having to see Fairy World isn't even set up until the halfway point. And even then, when it is set up, we have to cut back to Timmy, in which his problem pretty much starts, develops, and ends. All while we're meant to believe that Jimmy is just standing around in Fairy World with Crocker having small talk.
I think I'll take the VIP tour.
It's been like 10 minutes, maybe you should have jumped a bit sooner. It's definitely one of those things where I think the cuts made between each show should have been made more frequently as the action rose. That way both of them are taking on their foes at the same time instead of Timmy saving the day right when Jimmy's conflict is getting started. Makes for this constant stop and start, and because of that I often forget about how much of the special is left after Timmy saves Goddard. It doesn't ruin it, but it makes it feel so much slower, and not nearly as grand as it could have been. But that's the issue you have to run into when both of these characters are dealing with completely disconnected problems. Either way, I still love this special, and I do get their thought process, even if I don't think it worked out too well. And with that, this Power Hour comes to a close.
Thanks, boy genius.
Don't mention it, average kid who no one understands.
I hate that line. This special was a massive success on all fronts. I showed it off in my Danny Phantom video, but it was one of the most watched programs on cable that week. Kids were in love with this, and I even recall my mum watching these with me when it would air. Around 5 million people watched this when it aired, not to mention the DVDs and VHS sales. Look, I got both of them. Sweet. And so it not only made sense for Nick to greenlight a sequel, with us receiving, only 1 year later, the follow-up that everybody was asking for. It's time for the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2, When Nerds Collide. Another Jimmy Timmy Power Hour? You know what that means. Another Flash game. Wait, okay, this one actually looks kind of fun. I think this is by far the most well-known of the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours. It's definitely the one that aired the most on Nickelodeon, and the one that I was most excited to see come on TV. Funnily enough, this is actually the piece of media that would most get me into art. I remember we had just gotten one of those cable boxes where you could pause and rewind the TV and record stuff, and so I would just sit for hours trying to pause on the perfect exact frames I'd want to draw, and then I'd hang them all around my room, wish I still had those. I think I threw them away at some point. Kids, keep your old art. Also, why are you watching this? Have you even seen one of these shows? This was the one that I was most interested in revisiting. I feel like I've begun seeing more and more people these days coming out of whatever sick, twisted cave they've crawled out of to say the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours aren't very good. What's wrong with you? With the first one, I can certainly see where people are coming from, even if I myself don't personally agree. You know, it's just one of those things where the creativity and concept are cool enough to forgive any issues I have towards piecing. You know, I'd much rather it feel long and drawn out rather than rushed and uneventful. And so I'm hoping the second can, at the very least, keep up the stakes from the first, while not feeling as if these could have been two entirely separate episodes. Right off the bat, was anybody else super sad to see they never bothered actually making a new intro for the second, instead just hastily slapping a 2 at the end? Oh my god, that died. I didn't talk about it last time, because I forgot. But the intro for the specials is solid. Again, I wish there were a different one for each of them, but I understand why they'd rather put that budget somewhere else. One thing I really hated though was the canned laughter in the audience. Come on guys, him turning the fucking boombox into a pig isn't that funny. Puh. Thankfully, the setup this time around gets into things way quicker, and I really love how they kept continuity between specials. You know, it's not a wacky mishap that also puts Timmy in the world of Jimmy Neutron this time around. Instead, Timmy actively wants to go there now, remembering it to be the only place in the universe where a girl actually likes him.
No girl in the universe would date me. Oh my gosh, it's that boy who talks to inanimate objects.
So Timmy and Jimmy both just so happen to be throwing a Friday the 13th dance on the same day. Uh-oh. And so each of them are now at war over who gets to take Cindy to the dance, which she is more than happy with.
Cindy, are you really gonna let those two guys fight over you?
I thought I might.
Girl, you are my hero.
You know, I always forget that Cindy has the same voice actress as Sandy from SpongeBob. Now that I think about it, it's probably the main reason why they put both these characters in Nicktoons Unite. It's one less paycheck. Anyways, I like how this special showcases a scenario in which Timmy, who lives in a very static world that mostly keeps itself episodic, is being thrown back into Jimmy's world, which has slightly changed since his last visit. See, at that point in time, Fairly Odd Parents was in its 4th season, while Jimmy Neutron was in its 2nd. And there was actually a pretty major break between the two Power Hours. Over a year and a half. And so the world of Jimmy Neutron, now well into its 3rd season, was a little different. As far as I'm aware, Jimmy Neutron offered slight hints of serialization, whereas Fairly Odd Parents would often have this in the case of changing the status quo of its secondary characters, like Remy Bucksaplenty losing his godparent or Mark Chang living on Earth as a human for a bit. Instead, Jimmy Neutron would change the dynamics between its cast, like Sheen and Libby getting together at a certain point. No idea how, I just look at them. You know, it's weird that she's never brought up in Planet Sheen. Also bugged me as a kid that after the first couple episodes, Sheen acts like his friends on Earth don't exist. I always got really sad thinking about his ultra dad whose son is now just missing. While looking that up, I find this Nicktoons forum from 2010 where they were, for some reason, speculating about this upcoming cartoon. I bet in the first half of the episode they will all be there. They'll be wishing Sheen goodbye and Libby will kiss Sheen and then he will head off. You poor, poor soul. This is what actually happens in the first half.
Anybody here? I think I left my Ultra Largo's Boom Boom card. Oh, there it is.
But one of those changes to the show was making Jimmy and Cindy more outwardly like each other. Despite being fierce rivals early on, they make it clear that she likes him and he likes her. Debbie Derryberry shares some truly horrifying ship art of the two on her Twitter. I mean, hey, at least it's not this.
Sticking out your gat for the Rizzler. You're so skibidi. You're so Phantom Tax.
Okay, Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. 2. I love that because of this setup, it actively pits the two of them against each other. You know, we get to see them fight, which was always the coolest part to me as a kid. It's interesting, despite exclusively watching Fairly Odd Parents when I was younger, I always wanted Jimmy to win, which obviously doesn't happen because Timmy is fucking overpowered and nobody questions how he gets his equipment so fast. But whatever, it's cool. Getting to see Timmy on his own rocket ship and having the two duke it out in the skies. And the dumbass sound effects they use are great.
Oh yeah? Bring it on!
I think what I hate about Timmy so much here is that he just acts so entitled all the time. It's like he never even registers this as an alternate universe, and just acts like it's another thing for him to fuck around with for a bit. Again, a result of them taking a character like Timmy who lives in an extremely exaggerated world, and plopping him in Jimmy Neutron where everyone is relatively normal.
Bye, Nerdtron! Have fun dancing with Sheen!
Again, I never watched Jimmy Neutron and didn't quite know all the characters' names yet, so I was always confused as to what the fuck he was saying here and thought he was going, have fun dancing with sheep, which really bewildered me as a kid. Timmy's attitude doesn't ruin it, although at times it borders on being too much, but I think they balance it well enough. Like last time because of Jimmy being so full of himself. You know, he's kinda asking for it. He only becomes so adamant about asking Cindy to the dance because someone else might take her instead. I like that the one thing keeping Cindy from going to the dance with Jimmy is that he's an asshole, and I like that the one thing keeping Cindy from going to the dance with Timmy is potentially finding out he's a dumbass loser. This drama takes a backseat though, as we're once again introduced to the anti-fairies, with Anti-Cosmo trying to get his allies out of the fairy world prison. Something really strange to consider is that this special right here is only the second time the anti-fairies appeared in Fairly Odd Parents. After that first episode, they were locked away for 3 seasons. They're only in like 7 total episodes of that entire show after getting completely trashed in favor of Foop. Basically Butch Hartman's Stewie Griffin. He's seeking out someone from another universe to eat him and rescuing his friends, and gets just what he's looking for in Professor Calamitous, another main antagonist who rarely appears in the show itself. You know, it's like if Plankton was only in 5 episodes of SpongeBob, it's weird. After rescuing his friends and proceeding to immediately betray the professor, it's now up to Jimmy, Timmy, and friends to stop the anti-fairies from making every day Friday the 13th. Then they do that, and there's still 15 minutes left. Yeah, they didn't really fix that problem. Where as soon as one franchise's problem ends, then the other one begins. But it's not nearly as noticeable here because of Jimmy and Timmy constantly being with each other. It's not a case of us forgetting about one of them to instead focus on the other. Still, I like the story for this one a lot. And I enjoy that this special event series has its own continuity, feeling like it picks up right where the last left off, with Carl and Sheen continuing to call Timmy small-headed Jimmy, and Timmy's dad referencing the Buzz Adams outfit Timmy wore to get out of the test in the last one. Seeing Timmy wish for his parents to be rich supermodels though to impress Cindy reminded me of season 10 of The Fairly Odd Parents, where Chloe Carmichael, remember her, gives Timmy's dad a stock tip that makes him rich, something you think would just be a quick throwaway gag, but no, they continue to be millionaires throughout the rest of the show. Ugh. Also, barely mentioned them in the video so far, but Cosmo and Wanda are thankfully given much more to do this time. In the first because they were separated from Timmy for 95% of it, and again, all the Fairly Odd Parents stuff being dumped at the end. I usually forget about any contribution they had, but here that's not the case at all. Even if I do wish we got to see them interact more with Anti-Cosmo and Anti-Wanda. But the act of them involving these magical threats inherently gives them more agency on the matter. And being with Timmy allows them to actually make wishes this time. He even gives them over to Jimmy's friends at a certain point, which allows them to actually, you know, do stuff. We even get to see them come into Jimmy Neutron's world, where they're given their own 3D models. Why do they look better than the actual movie? I think what makes Cosmo and Wanda look so much better here is that they decided not to make their mouths protrude so much, making their expressions a lot easier to read compared to Timmy, whose mouth goes at this bizarre arc when opening too much. Now, the act of seeing these two worlds cross over is obviously going to have less impact compared to last time, simply through the act of just doing it again. But I think they do a good job here at expanding things from the last. Again, we get Cosmo, Wanda, and eventually Jorgen in the Jimmy world. Although for some reason Jimmy keeps calling him Jargon. I don't think they corrected Debbie on that.
Great! So all we have to do is keep Jargon angry.
And seeing all Jimmy's friends drawn in the Fairly Odd Parents style is fun too. I think I like Sheen the most. He's like a worm. This special does a much better job at switching dimensions more often. You don't feel like either show is getting more focus. It's the perfect combination. They also cut a lot more frequently at the start, which allows it not to come off too much like an extended Fairly Odd Parents episode with Jimmy Neutron characters. I think Jorgen gets it the worst though. His model is atrocious. And it all comes down to the textures, I think. They already had a tough job adapting him to 3D with that chin especially. You know, I don't envy them having to do this or anything, but I'm just not a fan of the way they rounded him out, giving him these super flat textures looking like simple solid colors. It contrasts strangely against Professor Calamitus's wrinkles and liver spots and makes his expressions hard to notice. I think I like the way they handled it in the Attack of the Toybots video game a lot more, where they instead opted to curve his chin downwards. It's not as accurate, but who cares if it looks better? Something I started noticing in the writing, however, is that I actually vastly enjoy the Jimmy Neutron segments over the Fairly Odd Parents ones, and I think that's because Jimmy Neutron is just the naturally funnier show. Again, I want to know how they divided the work on this. Did the Jimmy Neutron team only write the Jimmy segments and the Fairly Odd Parents team only write the Fairly Odd Parents segments? This is the kind of thing I want to fucking know, Butch. The Fairly Odd Parents always feels like it has to come to a halt to remind you of when they're telling a joke, only to then hold on it for a few seconds until they're sure you understood. When I think the best jokes of that show were always the quicker, more fast-paced ones. The moments that would catch you off guard and move on to something else quickly while you were wondering what the fuck was just said. Now, I think that actually contributed to the show being as popular as it was, not in spite of it. I think the more slow way of storytelling where the characters are constantly stopping to describe what we're seeing on screen allowed it to be pretty universal. You know, you'd have to be a fucking idiot to not follow along. But I don't know, it makes certain episodes age a bit poorly in retrospect and feel a bit too kiddie. Dude, I don't know what to say. I can't watch this kid's cartoon because it feels too much like a kid's cartoon. Comparatively, Jimmy Neutron always had that faster pace and is pretty witty. Despite a lot of the characters being dumb, it never feels like the jokes they're making are.
Yo, I told you I'm coming too. Cindy's my girl.
And we have no lives, so count us in.
And because of that, I think The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, boy genius, just holds up better as a funnier show. Blasphemy coming from this guy, I know. Maybe someday I'll actually have to sit down and marathon the series. I've only seen the first batch of episodes and most of the specials, which were great, like the Survivor parody and the one where Jimmy and Cindy get stranded on an island. It's a pretty short series too, having just a couple more episodes than Danny Phantom. So maybe I'll do a retrospective similar to that sometime, because I've enjoyed everything I've seen so far. Let me know if you'd want to see that. Thanks. So after the anti-fairies are defeated, Calamitus uses Jimmy's gene splicer to combine himself with Jorgen, in which he wants to use his Big Bang Bomb to destroy the world, which he will of course be safe from hiding under a desk. It's weird though that despite being one of his rare appearances on the show, they never chose to bring back Calamitus's main character trait, that being he never manages to finish anything he starts. That obviously makes for a less interesting villain, as you know his main weakness right from the get-go. But in a cartoon like this, I think there was room for some jokes to make out of that. Hell, even Nicktoons Unite brought that back for cutscenes. Either way, they steal Cindy and turn her into a hideous-looking fish. Gross. And so Timmy and Jimmy have got to finally team up to save the day. Their plan is pretty genius, too. I like that it actually involves some established lore from the Fairly Odd Parents. That being that they're gonna break so many of the rules at once that Jorgen can't help but get angry and try to break free, giving them the perfect opportunity to unsplice them.
Been waiting all day to say this. I wish Timmy Turner was gone!
$20 says that line was originally, I wish Timmy Turner was dead, and the network made them change it, you know, God forbid a child learn of this concept in a less serious context. Little Billy, your grandmother just died. If only Jimmy Neutron had introduced me to this sooner. Either way, Jorgen breaks free and Calamitus is defeated. Now there's just one thing on everybody's mind.
Who are you going to the dance with, girl?
With that, Cindy finally comes to understand that Timmy isn't the genius he claimed to be, and Jimmy is still an asshole. And so as the perfect workaround, Jorgen helps the trio enter a polyamorous relationship, as they have an interdimensional dance party where they can dance with Cindy at the same time. his shiny teeth for some reason.
Hi, Mrs. Neutron.
God, I always forget that came from this episode. And with that, we end the second Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. I don't know, I still think it holds up pretty well. Sure, the older I get, the more I'm able to point out issues with it. Again, still having that problem of having two different villain plots that don't mesh well together at all because of their insistence on pulling that betrayal angle. But I don't think it hurts it. At least the Calamitous plan is by far the more evil, you know, wanting to murder everyone. And so I think it's a fine escalation after the anti-fairies are defeated, especially after he's been pretty much treated as a joke the entire time. Honestly, I wouldn't really change a thing about it. It's the perfect blend of Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron. I mean, you barely even notice how Jimmy dominant this series is, given the nature of the Fairly Odd Parents. Timmy has friends, sure, but not nearly as closely as Carl or Sheen are to Jimmy. Same with love interests like Cindy, you know, I think it would be weird to try and shove AJ, Chester, or Trixie into this kind of thing, because they're not constants in Timmy's world. They focus more often than not solely being on Cosmo and Wanda. And so I think they did as good a job as they could have here at balancing both shows at once. In my opinion, it's pretty fantastic. And viewers only seem to agree as this special managed to do even better than the first, reaching 5.5 million viewers. You wouldn't think it as Butch almost never talks about the other two, but I think that's more so a result of him not being involved in the writing process of this one, and so it's much harder for him to take credit for something he didn't have as much involvement in. But again, this is the one Nick would air most of all on TV. I always saw this on. You know, I remember only seeing it once as a kid, went years without watching it again, then saw they were going to be airing it the same day I had Gaelic football practice, which is pretty much just soccer and rugby mixed together. And I didn't even fucking like doing it, look at me. My parents were forcing me to do it, but I begged, I pleaded, to please let me miss that one lesson as I just really wanted to watch the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2. And you know what they said? No. So I was sad. I think this was the peak of the Fairly Odd Parents in popularity. I wouldn't say the same about Jimmy, as nothing can top the amount of hype Nick were putting into the movie, but maybe the peak for the TV series. But in regards to Fairly Odd Parents, this is definitely when they were pumping the most into that show. Season 4 is when they were giving it their all in general. They were riding high off the success of Epic-Catastrophe, a special I would love to talk about on a longer level sometime because I actually think it's one of the weaker Fairly Odd Parents events. But it was so popular that it led to Nick giving them fucking specials galore. Season 4 not only had a couple of 22-minute events like Shelf Life or the Big Superhero Wish, but in that one season, we got the first Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, School's Out the Musical, which is fantastic, but also Channel Chasers, what many believe to be the absolute peak of that show. I know some folks have started to disagree with that statement, which I'd argue is simply a result of the kids who grew up with the later seasons getting old enough to voice their opinions online. But anyways, the main claim is that the ending wouldn't work as a series finale as it shows Timmy to be a bad parent, just like his, learning nothing from his experience and giving his kids an evil babysitter too. But like, that's the whole fucking point. It's meant to be a full circle kind of moment. The whole special builds up to this idea that upon Timmy giving up Cosmo and Wanda, all his bad memories went along with them. They changed his life for the better and gave him nothing but a completely pleasant memory of his childhood, shown through the conversation he has with Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin. Because of this, he has no memory of how evil Vicky was, or how neglectful his parents were. And upon growing up, his childhood sensibilities went away as well, clearly shown through him looking at the photo of his childhood self, looking at his now normal fish, and it bringing him genuine happiness for a reason he just can't understand, before getting distracted by his newfound adult responsibilities. It's the perfect bittersweet end of that series, and I don't really understand this strange revisionism, where it's actually bad on the most surface level. Okay, wait, what's this video about? Season 4 was hard to top, is my point. And it wasn't topped. Season 5 had a lot of great episodes, and of course it contained the amazing second Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, along with later having the third, even having Fairly Idle, which I think is pretty underrated. Okay, I'm just realizing now I should just make a video sometime about every Fairly Odd Parents special. There we go. But the point, again, is, from here, the Fairly Odd Parents went on a slow decline, with Nickelodeon deciding that the series, along with Jimmy Neutron, would be coming to a close, choosing to end things out on one final hurrah. The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3. So let's take a look and see if it would have been a satisfying end to either show. You know, for years I've been looking for this Fairly Odd Parents fishbowl. I couldn't believe it was real, but like, you know, no duh, of course it would. It's the most obvious merchandise to make from that show. I had just accepted for years that I was never gonna own it. I mean, who the fuck keeps their 20-year-old cheap-ass plastic fishbowl laying around? But then a couple weeks back, I saw it on eBay, complete in box. Fucking mashed that buy button. I had to get it. Also find the matching glow-in-the-dark gravel that goes along with it, and got ready to have my own Cosmo and Wanda. Then I posted a picture of it to Twitter, and everybody begged me not to put a fish in it. Apparently small bowls aren't good for them. So the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3.
The final chapter?
You idiots!
Jimmy Timmy 3 the Jerkinator. Catch it again tomorrow at 8, only on Nick.
I mentioned it before, but the release schedule for this was insane. Coming out in July of 2006, only around half a year after the last, which means both of them were bound to be in production at the same time for a period. I guess Nickelodeon saw the success of the first and figured they could make this a regular event as long as both shows were still in the air. Both of them were cancelled that same year. This is often seen as the weakest Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, and so I'm curious to see if my thoughts on it have changed much, because I loved this one as a kid. I really love how low the stakes are at the beginning. Jimmy is just looking through other dimensions and stumbles upon Timmy, who's just been rejected by all two of his friends, Chester and Edja.
Those guys are practically my only friends in this universe. You know what that means?
You should be a better person.
With this, he has the bright idea to once again head to Retroville to meet up with Cindy Vortex. And so it's another battle of Brian versus Average to see who can get to her house first.
Timmy will be just an average kid who no one understands.
Somebody should write a song about that.
That line sucks. They don't focus on this for too long, though, as they soon find out Cindy isn't even home. And so what are they gonna do?
Wanna hang out? Are you nuts? Have you gone completely mental? You wanna hang out with me, the two of us together?
Maybe.
Okay, sure.
If this was the first Power Hour, I probably wouldn't have liked how quickly they just become buddies here. But honestly, after 2 hours of them endlessly bickering with each other, I'm down for it. Enough time has passed with the two interacting for me to find it kind of charming that they're so quick to let bygones be bygones. Feels true to how actual kids are. There's no real goal set up this time. All Timmy wants to do is hang out with someone. And so I like that the plot here is almost meta in a sense. They've saved their worlds on multiple occasions, and the act of running into each other isn't nearly as epic as it once was. And so it's fitting that this special has a pretty laid-back feeling to it. They're just looking for something to do.
Jimmy and Timmy are friends? Do you know what this means? Do you? Do you?
Whereas the others felt like they took a little long to get to the point, this one just beelines directly towards it. It only takes 2.5 minutes for Jimmy and Timmy to run into each other. And they don't even give a shit when Cindy does come back. They've finally come to understand bros before hoes.
I'm like catnip to those boys.
They poop on you in a box?
That's kitty litter, you idiot!
Gross. Honestly, they're kind of sadistic this time around. They both start teaming up to beat their respective lower-tier villains, and realize how overpowered they are when together. Jimmy cancels out Cosmo and Wanda's rules with his science, and Timmy's magic can assist Jimmy's inventions in ways he couldn't normally accomplish. It feels like this was when they wanted to insert the most fan service into these. It's really cool getting to see them casually just tackle Jimmy's foes and seeing Timmy riding along in the Robo-Walker. And it's sweet having them go inside a Crimson Chin comic and seeing Jimmy get his own superhero alter ego.
I hate the new Jimmy Timmy friendship.
Damn, so close. They get bored pretty quick though. It's like playing GTA on God mode. It's not as fun as you think. And so what do they do to counteract this? Well, they're gonna create their own supervillain, played by the carrot from Daddy Daycare, alright. It's fucked up. They're literally creating life just for the purpose of being able to torture it. And torture it they do. By accidentally giving it emotions, he's actually a pretty swell guy. And as a result, Jimmy and Timmy frustratedly try to beat the meanness into him. Problem is, they've accidentally made him adaptable. And so after long enough of screwing with him, he does become evil, now with the ability to steal their powers and use it against them. It's so fucked up, this is the nicest guy in the world. He gets fucked over by them twice and is still willing to forgive them, in which they just ditch him again, what the fuck? It may seem lame to have a meet-up villain, you know, instead of pulling from another set from each show. But it works in my opinion. I mean, who else were they going to use as a threat here? Vicky, beautiful, gorgeous? Maybe they could have gone full meta and had the villains be Butch Hartman and John Adias. Or even, you know, the Nickelodeon Nickelodeon executives, what if the plot was the ultimate fuck you, and it was about Timmy and Jimmy teaming up to stop their shows from being cancelled, ending with Jimmy dying at the end and only Timmy living on? Okay, wait, that's just the ending to Sonic Adventure 2. But also, having one bad guy seriously helps the pacing. Instead of having a fear-giving one show's bad guy the spotlight over the other, they're able to focus solely on the new guy, helping that stop-and-go issue I felt the previous two specials slightly suffered from. It's also really apparent that he was designed as a Fairly Odd Parents character first. He looks atrocious in the Jimmy Neutron style. He only appears in that world for like 10 seconds total, but you can see that exact same texture and lighting issue on him. It's awful. Also, I mentioned how ridiculous having someone like Vicky as a villain would be here, but then I was immediately reminded of how there are actually more than 3 Jimmy Timmy Power Hours. Yeah, that's right. The Nickelodeon magazine, which was running at the same time, actually decided to have a couple of their own crossover events between the two characters. We have the Jimmy Timmy plus Vicky Power Hour, which sees Wanda and Cosmo leave for a fairy reunion, with Timmy being stuck with Vicky all by himself. Coincidentally, though, Jimmy Neutron steps out of Timmy's trash can, in which he's seeking out Cosmo and Wanda to use their magic to help him with an invention. With them gone, however, he instead decides to use a spare X-Boy Gamebox controller, yes, that's really what it's called, to invent a behavior modifier to make her nicer. When they get tricked, however, they have to think like kids instead of relying on magic or science, and so spray her down with shaken up soda bottles. And that's it. What fun! Another sees Timmy and Jimmy pit science versus magic. I like how this one keeps Jimmy in his own art style since they're still in his universe. That was a neat touch. Gimmick this time is Jimmy has to use magic and Timmy has to use science. Doesn't work out well. Finally, we have Dimension Intervention, my personal favorite. I love the implication here that Jimmy and Timmy just continue to hang out in each other's universes off screen, or after doing it so much they begin noticing certain elements from their worlds intertwining. Hugh looks more like Timmy's dad, Crocker is now his teacher, he finds out his name is now Jimmy Turner and he's got giant buck teeth. It gets super wild by the end with the entire Nickelodeon multiverse colliding, all the Nicktoons start invading before Jimmy manages to reset everything, in which we later learn the same thing was happening to Timmy too. Even makes a fun little nod to SpongeBob at the end. Why did this have to be a 2-page comic? Why couldn't we ever get that fabled Nicktoons movie? It writes itself. These comics are fun. Obviously not a substitute for watching the specials or anything, but I don't know, I think there was an opportunity here to animate some of these. Maybe play them as bumpers like they used to do with the Jimmy Neutron shorts. They'd only be like 30 seconds each, who cares? Okay, back to the third one. Chester and AJ are here too. Not sure why. Obviously, it's to feed into the lesson by the end of Jimmy and Timmy learning not to take advantage of their friends. But they just don't do much. Feels like their only reason for being here was to balance the Jimmy Timmy characters a bit more. But really, it's kind of weird to see them go on an adventure like this. I think it's the only time in the entire show where they've ever gotten involved in the action. I don't like AJ here especially. They've boiled him down to a single joke. They begin by establishing he's about to freeze himself to be unfrozen in the future, but Chester wakes him up right after. So uh-oh, he thinks he's in the future. And so every single line involving AJ has to have that gag. He just keeps repeating how the future is weird, or the future, it's the same as his time. Isn't that so weird? And everyone lets this continue until the very last quarter where Libby just tells him he never went to the future. And he believes her immediately. They could have just done that at any point in time. You're great. Also, spoilers, but by the end, the villain who they later dubbed Shirley, which he then takes back and renames himself the villain whose name isn't Shirley, turns Cosmo and Wanda into humans, in which Chester and AJ never question who these random tiny adults hanging out with them are. Huh.
Not everybody who has a mustache is evil. Your mother has a mustache. You should give him a mustache.
Look, it's that one funny reaction image. Are you reacting yet? Wait, why does the lighting look so good here? Also, might I say, they just look abysmal in the Jimmy Neutron style as well. The bright pink lips on AJ are questionable at best, and Chester's giant fucking overbite, while accurate, looks horrible when translated to 3D. It really does seem like both of their models were pretty rushed. This all hints at something greater, which I'm sure I'm not the first person to point out, but the Timmy to Jimmy ratio in this special fucking sucks. We span maybe 5 collective minutes in Jimmy World, and the rest is all Fairly Odd Parents. It's so mundane too. There are so many friends in this one that they don't have anything for them to do. It's so focused on Timmy and Jimmy that all we get for them are scene after scene of them just sitting around talking about Timmy and Jimmy. It's all these guys have going on in their lives. Their entire subplot revolves around trying to have fun without the supposed centers of the universes, I guess. I'm also not a fan of what they do with Jimmy later on either, as when the villain whose name isn't Shirley learns about his adapting abilities. You know, I guess you could call him his adaptability. He steals Cosmo and Wanda's magic like I mentioned before, but also Jimmy's intelligence, now putting Jimmy somewhere below Cosmo's IQ somehow. But all that means is for the rest of the special, Jimmy is not acting like himself and near useless, just another Cosmo.
Now he's a villain and a genius, just like Dr. Phil.
I wouldn't have minded that much if this obstacle wasn't present the entire rest of it. He never even gets it back by the end. I guess the canonical end to Jimmy Neutron is him becoming a dumbass. We've truly come full circle. Anyways, I can't imagine the intent was to have it lean so heavily in the Fairly Odd Parents fever. I think it was sadly just a result of circumstances outside of their control. See, by the end, Shirley... Sorry, I apologize for dead naming. The villain whose name isn't Shirley decides he's gonna suck everybody from both universes into this white void where they'll all be forced to hang out with him, even deciding to suck in objects from the two dimensions. All of these objects, however, appear in the Fairly Odd Parents style, most being pretty lazily done too, like Jimmy's lab looks fucking stupid. They took everything from a front-facing angle when that's rarely how they're approached in the show. It's sad because I get what they were going for. They wanted it to be a blend of 2D and 3D. We're seeing the 2D Fairly Odd Parents characters on a 3D plane. That's a great idea. I just think we were missing more from Jimmy Neutron other than just being 3D. The issue of the Jimmy style barely appearing would have been mitigated if these objects appearing in this world were 3D models. Honestly, if they really wanted to do something special for this finale, even though it probably would have taken more work than they had the time or budget for, but this should have been an expansion on that ending from the original where they shake hands. We should have seen all the Jimmy Neutron characters in 3D interacting with the Fairly Odd Parents characters in 2D. That would have blew people's fucking minds, mine at least. I wonder if maybe that was the original plan and got scrapped at one point. But even then, it's not bad. Also gives them the opportunity to give some of the tertiary cast a moment to interact, which they've never really done yet. Like Timmy and Jimmy's parents. And I enjoy that moment where the villain whose name isn't Shirley starts matching up different character archetypes. That was fun. I also have to wonder if the reason they lessened the amount of CG here was because of the increased production going on at DNA Productions, the studio who animated Jimmy Neutron. Around this time, they were also working on The Ant Bully, the film that would go on to pretty much bankrupt them. But it actually came out in the exact same month as Jimmy Timmy 3, and so perhaps working on that and finishing their final order of Jimmy Neutron episodes was stretching them thin. Maybe they just couldn't find the time. Again, which sucks because after the 16-minute mark, there is only maybe 30 seconds of total CG in the rest of the episode. That short bit with the villain whose name isn't Shirley, and the very last shot. Something else I noticed here is that the writing seems way closer in style to the Fairly Odd Parents this time around. Again, it's interesting to see these specials and how much each show changed between them. Like Cosmo and Wanda bickering way more this time around, it's half their goddamn lines. It's not at that point of being unbearable yet, it's still somewhat funny, but I don't know, they really could not stop toning that down. Still though, what I think puts this special above the first in my opinion, despite the lower stakes, is the comedy. This is by far the funniest out of the three. What it lacks in epicness, it more than makes up for by just having better gags.
I don't have any. That's not mine. That's not me.
It's just brought down by, again, having that Fairly Odd Parents problem where all the characters are way too simple. Everyone only talks about Timmy and Jimmy. The two of them are complete assholes and don't realize they're neglecting their friends, but have that big sappy turnaround where they say how much they care about them. Even the ending is pretty forced too, with the two of them apologizing to the long name guy. But like, they only feel bad because he's about to destroy their universes.
See? Now you respect me, because I'm a threat.
Either way, their plan here is actually pretty smart, with them manipulating him into removing his weapons by forcing him into situations that would cause him to adapt them away. He now lives in Dimsdale, which will never be brought up again, and with that, the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3 comes to a close. Jimmy's still a dumbass. And grabby, apparently. While I can see folks not liking this one as much due to it not being as cool or epicular, I think it more than makes up for it by just being fun. Again, we've had 2 hours of high-stakes situations. We've seen Jimmy save Timmy's world and Timmy save Jimmy's world. Them ending out in a fun romp of the two finally getting along and realizing how destructive they can be when putting their minds together, only to be stripped of their most powerful assets, is a cool idea. Even if going all out on a giant finale would have been sweet. Honestly, I didn't even consider that. It's really weird we never got to see that calamitous Crocker team up. That makes way too much sense. You know, mad scientist, and third grade teacher. There's no viewer amount for this special, at least not readily available online like the other two, but I have to imagine it did similarly, if not a little worse than the last. They were so close that each show was still relatively as popular, but also so close that I'm sure there wasn't as much spectacle around the event, which is evident by how subdued the commercials are, not treating this nearly as cool as the last two. And with that, Jimmy Neutron and the Fairly Odd Parents were cancelled. Nickelodeon had just switched CEOs at the time, and I'm sure they were looking to spark some new life into the network. Also, again, DNA Productions had went bankrupt around that same time. Not that it would directly result in Jimmy getting cancelled or anything, but I'm sure to them the hassle of trying to find a new CG animation company in the mid-2000s who could adapt to the show quickly would have been way more of a headache compared to just greenlighting something new. At least then they can create some marketing buzz around a new series. Then they tried to bring it back 4 years later, and everybody hated it. Then they brought it back for a car commercial. Wait, why does this look better than the actual show?
What else can your dimensional thingamalyzer change, Jimmy?
Well, what the fuck was he gonna do? Which really sucks because apparently they had some pretty big plans for the series' potential 4th season, which included fully leaning into the serialization. Evil Jimmy would have returned, Jimmy and Cindy would become an official couple. Their ideas sounded extremely ambitious and their natural evolution for the series. You know, too bad though. You get the ant bully. On the other side, Nickelodeon also cancelled Fairly Odd Parents, which Butch claimed to be a result of SpongeBob being more successful. Which I can't imagine being fully accurate. I'm sure that was a factor, but I also think they could have just thought the series had run its course. It had 80 episodes and like 5 TV movies. Time to call it a day and move on to something new. But then, Butch had a genius idea. Let's add a baby. Yeah, Butch decided to drudge up an idea he had planned for the also cancelled Fairly Odd Parents theatrical film, which had a finished script I wish I could read someday, and which he planned for it to end with the godparents having a kid. And that seemed to be just what Nick were looking for to rejuvenate interest in the show. And with that, it continued to run. For a little bit longer, in which they cancelled it again. And so Butch had a genius idea. Let's add a dog. And then it got cancelled again. Point being, Fairly Odd Parents stuck around, which is both fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate because, well, I liked the Fairly Odd Parents. Poof wasn't that bad. But also unfortunate because it's hard not to deny that Jimmy Neutron deserved it more. They had an actual plan, a story they wanted to tell, and so it's sad that the show that got to continue was the one that went on to just throw shit at the wall and see what stuck. Who knows if Nick will ever try to revive Jimmy Neutron again? The voice cast have been advocating for it for years, and I'm sure we'll see something eventually. Certainly as we're approaching the 2000s nostalgia era. But if not, I hope fans of it can take solace in knowing that the show ended while it was still good. Imagine being in my shoes. The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour trilogy isn't perfect. You know, I'm not the first to admit that. At the same time, I think all 3 of these still managed to be great in spite of their issues. For whatever problems I can talk about regarding pacing or the eventual imbalance of crossing over the 2 shows, nothing will ever change the fact that these events will go down as some of the most monumental moments in Nickelodeon history, doing something completely unheard of at the time and pushing the boundaries for what to expect from a kids network. Nickelodeon from this era just felt like they got it. They knew exactly what would have you on the edge of your seat as a kid. And for that, I'll always look back on these specials fondly. You know, I got to the end of this video and realized I never actually showed off this fucking Fairly Odd Parents fishbowl. So look, here it is. The box, not in the best condition, you know, it's not perfect or anything, but I fucking got the whole thing put together. Again, I find the fucking gravel that has the poof on it. Glows in the dark, apparently. I never get to test it. They got the castle, all of it. I even bought this little fucking plant thing to match how it looks in the show. And then right after I get it all put together, don't put a fish in it. So great, all wasted. And I spent way too much on this to not put a fish in it. So I guess I will just. Oh, that's okay. Look, it came with these little Cosmo and Wanda like things that are attached. So I guess if I want, I can just look. They're kind of broken too. I can just stick these in it, and then it's still like I get Cosmo and Wanda in a fishbowl. I guess that will do. But also, speaking of dumbass products I impulsively buy, look at this. It's a Nickelodeon bowling ball, bag, and I was like, oh, fucking bowling ball. I love bowling. I love the Knuckles show. So I was like, of course I'm gonna get the Fairly Odd Parents bowling ball, and then I can like do a short or something where I like bowl with it. But then look at this. It looks sweet, but if you were to notice anything, it doesn't even have fucking holes in it. What? That's the whole fucking point. You're meant to bowl with it, so just a waste, great. It has officially been almost 3 years since the release of the Patrick Star Show, and 2 years since my video on it, if you could believe that, where I titled it and SpongeBob's other spin-off, Camp Coral, as being awful. Me even claiming the Patrick Show to be one of the worst shows I've ever seen. And I've seen like 3, 4 even. And while I was very harsh towards it, probably the harshest I've ever been towards a cartoon, it's interesting to consider that the Patrick Show has managed to keep on trucking, despite near universal backlash from critics. Whereas Camp Coral, which was slightly more well received, again slightly, since my last video has only managed to release an added 13 or so episodes, again in the span of 2 years. The Patrick Show, on the other hand, has pumped out a pretty impressive 57, which is crazy considering most shows these days are lucky to get 10 episodes in a season before getting cancelled as a tax write-off. So if anything, it's nice to see a show be given this much attention, even if it is a spin-off based off one of the biggest children's IPs in the world. Hopefully the same confidence is given towards that new rock, paper, scissors show, which seems pretty funny.
Material, so the reported levels from the census are essentially null and void.
Well, you are a child.
In this case, the sheer amount of episodes given seems to have really benefited the Patrick Show in the eyes of the public, with me seeing folks on social media sing the cartoon's praises way more frequently. It seems we're long past the days of people brushing it aside based off 20-year-old interview excerpts by Steven Hillenburg. Congratulations, the Patrick Show, that's an achievement, genuinely. Again, it is no secret that I was incredibly harsh towards it, for reasons other than the aforementioned getting mad on a dead man's behalf. I couldn't care less. RIP. But the more I saw folks talking about the significant improvement the show has taken, especially in its second season, the more I find myself baffled. I thought the Patrick Show, despite featuring some insanely creative and fun animation, seriously suffered from a lack of focus, aiming to sideline a general story structure in favor of drawn-out, nonsensical gags which weren't entertaining nor funny. Episodes ending with you feeling nothing more than, well, why did I just watch that? Which felt even more pointless due to the fact that the main series was already doing the same thing. It was basically just a more gag-driven SpongeBob, at a time when SpongeBob was arguably at its most gaggiest of gag-driven. I don't know, I'd like to think the way I approach things has shifted since that point in time. I also got a microphone that doesn't peak every other second since then, that's nice too. And so today, given its apparent resurgence in recent times, I thought it would be only fair to check up on the Patrick Show, see how it's doing in the year of our Lord and Savior, and whether or not there's any merit to, well, its own existence. I mean, yeah, basically. During this revisit, I decided to check out the first couple episodes of the series again to see if my views had changed at all, and sadly, I was only reminded of why my initial reaction to the series was so negative. And it's because I think the first episode of this show is really, really bad. I always like first episodes that naturally introduce you to the characters and the world they live in, while showing you an average day in their lives. And while the Patrick Show does feature a pretty standard story, and lets you get to know each of Patrick's family members, I think it flops like a fish in making any of it feel natural, or in making you interested in what's going on with this new setup. You know, the last way I would ever think to naturally establish my main set of characters would be for Patrick to spend up until the first half of the episode, no exaggeration, just walking across the dining room table and naming each of them. No conversation going on, they just get their funny quip, and then we move on to the next, him literally forgetting who his grandpet is just so he can make the audience aware of who this randomly inserted character is. I'm Grandpat, don't you remember? I've been here since episode 1, look, there I am, see? Which is even more baffling considering the show's intro already does this.
Hi, I'm Patrick Star, and I live with my parents!
From here we get to see what the episode is actually about. Patrick keeps missing breakfast and is starving. So what do we see him do about this? Well, he starts by looking for food, his grandpat tells him a story about hunting, he does a segment on his TV show about cooking, he then realizes that during that he's missed their designated food time again, but then it's all good because they're having another meal right after. Amazing. Like, that is the exact rundown. I don't believe I'm missing anything important out of that. It's such a slow and drawn-out farce of a story where nothing actually happens, and the pacing isn't fast enough to make up for the fact that nothing's going on. All I got out of these first few episodes is the occasional funny visual gag. I don't know why this drawing made me laugh so hard.
I think it's time for the talk.
Put down the baseball mitt, son.
Sure, it looks nice, and all their attempts to switch up the art style is appreciated, including some stellar stop motion, and, you know, I think the storyboarding for this show is particularly great, especially compared to a lot of other cartoons today, and I absolutely adore the background art with that fun colored pencil style. But all of these great visuals are in service of nothing if I don't care about what's going on. I need something to latch onto. I think I was a little too focused in my previous video about a cartoon needing some kind of 3-act plot. You know, just because it's something that I prefer, doesn't mean that just trying to be zany and fun is automatically bad. But I think the slow start of the Patrick Show really did itself a disservice. Because as the season goes on, I think it actually manages to improve a lot, and it's because of one simple factor: the pacing. There are episodes here I really do hate, like Stare Wars, which is just a slog to get through, with Patrick and his grandpat having a stare-off which quickly escalates into this giant all-out war. But for me personally, I just wasn't invested in the why. There's no reason or consequence around what we're seeing, it's just them bringing more and more people into their war to basically stand around until the episode's over. I don't know what I'm meant to care about here. But comparatively, Season 1 has episodes like Fitzpatrick, which I find myself really enjoying, and it's because it's super fast and to the point. From the get-go, you understand how ridiculous of an idea this is, but the show never stops to acknowledge it. Patrick's Irish evil twin shows up and he wants to ruin his life by framing him for a bunch of misdeeds, Sonic Adventure 2 style. And so they just run with it, them going from location to location seeing him attempt to tarnish Patrick's good name. It works so well for me because there's a focal point. There's a through line that's broad enough to do a bunch of shit with, but not so broad that it feels like this is a show about nothing.
How do we know when it's over?
The idea of taking this evil, malignant character who's trying to create chaos in a world that's already unbridled chaos is a funny idea, and so seeing him constantly feel through Patrick's sheer ignorance is funny. If I had one complaint, it's that even in some of the best episodes here, I find the endings are pretty rushed. For example, here after doing a bunch of heinous shit, a door in Patrick's room just opens and sucks him in. All's well that ends well. Nothing brought it on, which leads you to believe this could have happened at any point in the episode. It doesn't ruin it, again, I still enjoyed it a lot, but stuff like that certainly leaves me with a confusing taste in my mouth. Like, why even have an ending at that point? Just cut to black if you care that little.
Look at this. There's skid marks on all his underwear.
What? And I'm sure we all heard about the season finale, which featured the Bubble Bass review segment, where Bubble Bass, naturally, a character the show has grown quite fond of in recent years, is seen doing his own internet cartoon criticism video shitting all over the in-universe Patrick show. And what do you know, it manages to be really, really funny, which in my opinion was due to how laser-focused it was on the concept. There's a lot to poke fun at with the topic. The character PNGs, the exaggerated performance, the large focus on negativity. And they hit each and every one of those gags without ever feeling like it's dwelling on any one of them for too long. They give you a quick joke, then move on to the next. That way they're constantly hitting you with gags to the point where you're going to find at least a few of them humorous, and it's something I appreciated more about the series as it went on. Nothing much of note is happening, but the faster pace allows them to do so much more with their basic ideas. You get the idea that it's almost like at a certain point the show got overtaken by fans, and I mean that in a good way, where they're trying to elevate the material and take it to new places instead of just trying to bring back the stuff fans recognize for the sake of making you remember the glory days. Like that other show. Apparently around 2/3 into the season there was a big switch up with the staff working on the show, with a lot of new folks being brought in, compared to the largely similar crew that was previously shared between Patrick and the main series. And while I don't think that was a direct cause of the quality increase, again there were a lot of episodes before that I actually find myself enjoying a lot, but I think at the very least it was able to breathe some new life into the series, in that it offers us something drastically different to what you're going to find with regular SpongeBob. It appears the series also moved back to being fully board-driven compared to the script-driven approach it had previously, which is extremely rare these days. You know, so rare that the show didn't start that way, despite it obviously being the more favorable method for it to choose given its tone and style of comedy. Season 2 from the get-go starts completely off the walls. The show has evolved into this meta experience that's not even somewhat attempting to take itself seriously, building off the best of the first season and expanding upon it. The first episode sees the Patrick Star Show, again in-universe, also begin its second season, in which they immediately blow the entire budget within seconds and have to spend the entire rest of the episode endlessly shilling products to make their money back. I mentioned it before, but I think what I learned to enjoy so much about the series, especially as it went on, is that it never dwells on anything, and it's something I appreciate. Quick nod to the original show, gone in a second, to free him sometimes. Making a gag about the animation process altogether, that's all it is, a gag. It's moving at such a fast rate that there's more opportunity for shit to catch you off guard.
It's gonna be just fine.
Wow!
That's not to mention how much more creative the plots in general have gotten. I really liked this one that featured one of Patrick's mom's tattoos getting lost on another body and having to get back to reconnect with his girlfriend. It was really well done. Or the recent episode where Patrick wakes up completely off model.
Patrick Star!
Now he has to find a way to get things back to normal by traveling through the show's future seasons.
Welcome to the new Patrick Show. Today we're going to talk about friendship.
The fact that me and Steven Universe fans really mad made it even funnier. I mean, guys, it was clearly done in jest. I genuinely wasn't expecting my opinion on this show to shift so much. And while it's not my favorite cartoon or anything, I think I'll just always prefer something with a larger focus on character-driven writing and comedy. I certainly think the Patrick Star Show has done more than enough to stand out and justify its own existence. Some might argue why it even had to do that. Why can't it just do what it wants without having to prove itself to anyone? And I think it simply comes back to the fact that current SpongeBob is in a much different place from where it started. For better or worse, you can be the judge, I don't care either way. There's no arguing that upon announcement, there was a large feeling in the air that the Patrick Show felt rather pointless. Something unneeded. When your network only has 3, 4 at most new cartoons airing at a time, why would I want half of that to be what's essentially the same show? SpongeBob switched to being more gag-driven in the past few seasons, and so why do we need another show that fulfills that same purpose? But through watching more of it, I think I've begun to recognize and appreciate the ways in which the show manages to be different to its sister show. You know, similar doesn't mean the same. And so no matter what Nickelodeon's reasons were for greenlighting the Patrick Show, money, I think the crew, especially in its second season, have shown just why the Patrick Show deserves to be viewed and enjoyed as its own thing, doing something that, at this point in time more than ever, is rarely done in cartoons. And that is being cartoony. Shocker, I know. And I'm glad to see that find their groove. I'd recommend checking the show out, especially its second season. It's not for everyone. Hell, again, I'd contest whether or not it's even for me. But there's a lot to like here for sure. And I do feel bad for jumping the gun on it so soon. I think it's safe to say that this has not been a great week for Nickelodeon. With the release of the Max documentary Quiet on Set, or, you know, you just watched the whole thing on Twitter with Trick and Josh funny moments looping in the bottom. I don't judge. It exposed a lot of people out there to the horrific reality that is child stardom, delving primarily into the career of Dan Schneider, a figure that I've talked about in this channel before, although focusing much more on his creations rather than the man himself for obvious reasons. It's an eye-opening expose to the world that was 90s and 2000s Nickelodeon. I've never really been one of those people who argued you couldn't separate the art from the artist, but it's hard not to admit that while watching it, it made me seriously reconsider how I felt about some of my favorite series growing up. And while this is mainly stuff that we've been hearing for years, especially in relation to Dan Schneider, whose name has been a mere punching bag for almost a decade now, I think this being the first wide-scale publication of something like this, released in a format that people are obsessed with right now, is what's resulted in this resurgence of people finding out about this stuff for the first time and calling for the man to be put in prison. Which, listen dude, if John K didn't get sent to prison, then there's no way in hell Dan will. The most you can do is just keep him as far away from children's entertainment as possible. Because they really go into a lot here. His creepy, overprotective nature over his cast, the treatment of them as if they were adults and not in such formative years in their lives. Although I have to wonder why the documentary never brought attention to those weird as hell tags he would have at the end of his episodes, to make it sound like the kids were saying something provocative.
I heard you swallow. Sometimes I do it to myself.
I don't want to get blackballed. How bad do you want this?
As a kid, I just thought it was funny they were saying random words. And all this got me thinking, beyond the allegations and truly abhorrent events that transpired as a result of their poor management, isn't it just weird in general to think about how irrelevant Nickelodeon has become within the last decade? In the 90s and 2000s, they were unavoidable. It was strange for a kid to not be watching Nickelodeon. I would be so pissed off going to a friend's house and saying they didn't have cable. Where's the SpongeBob? However, nowadays, if a kid said they still regularly watch the channel, my only response would be, what though? What are you watching, Baby SpongeBob? Live-action Lincoln Loud? What are you, stupid? From taking even the quickest of glances towards my channel, it's fairly evident that a lot of the programming Nickelodeon has produced over the years means a lot to me. It's one of the only things out there I find the ability to be nostalgic towards. And so in a way, it's sad to see that the company responsible for creating some of the most influential material for me as a kid only stands today as a mere shell of its former self. Nothing more than an awkward subject. And so today I wanted to spend some time talking about it. Not only why I think the company has gone so downhill from a juggernaut of children's entertainment to something I wouldn't want within a 10-foot radius of my kid, but also I want to highlight why it did have such a stranglehold on so many kids at one point. And so with that, let's talk about the downfall of Nickelodeon. Obviously, Nick's decline is a result of many factors. The company has become less and less culturally relevant for much longer than just when all this Schneider business came to light. The main reasoning, obviously, being the fact that kids are much more interested in watching shows on their phones and iPads rather than on televisions. Even Nickelodeon shows with re-uploads gaining millions of views, but of course that doesn't help the main issue, which is the network suffering. Cable just isn't that popular anymore, most people opting to cancel theirs in favor of signing up for a couple streaming services. And unfortunately, it ain't the one Nickelodeon is on. Paramount Plus is a terrible app, it's got a horrible interface, there's barely anything to watch, and overall it just runs horribly. I've been trying to watch through Danny Phantom on there for the first time in the past couple weeks, and it's really opened my eyes to how awful that service is. It's just always buffering, and it isn't a problem I have with Netflix or Max, so I have to assume there just isn't enough money being put into the servers. And so when watching shows or even just navigating the menus, you're constantly met with lag. It is abysmal. But why should they put more money into it? Their subscriber base is already miles below their competition despite being around for a couple years at this point. No amount of charming crossover commercials is helping the fact that Paramount Plus simply doesn't have that much to offer. And it seems Viacom have become aware of this too. Because when checking out Netflix recently, I've begun noticing that way more Nickelodeon shows have begun appearing back on there. Fairly Odd Parents, Rugrats, Drake and Josh, a lot of popular series, are now all available to watch on a streaming service that isn't owned by Nick's parent company, and I think that's incredibly telling. The only Nickelodeon things worth getting on Paramount Plus seems to be the stuff that isn't popular enough for other services to want to buy the rights to. Or SpongeBob, which they've been putting a massive marketing push into, seemingly being one of the only reasons to get Paramount Plus. Because in reality, what does Nickelodeon have now? Bad reboots of their more successful shows from their heydays? Spin-offs to said successful shows? Or the occasional new cartoon thrown in, that only manages to run for a season or two as all the wind is pulled out of its sails in favor of promoting the CM3 SpongeBob cartoons. SpongeBob, Lighthouse, Rugrats, Fairly Odd Parents, that's all there is to Nickelodeon now on a cartoon level. Rock, paper, scissors on the surface level seems like a horrible idea, but upon seeing clips of it, it actually manages to be pretty funny. But that doesn't even matter because I'm sure half of you out there watching this thinking, what the fuck is rock, paper, scissors? I suppose first of all, it's important to highlight why I think Nickelodeon was such a triumphant force in children's entertainment in the first place, to directly contrast as to where they are now and how they lost their way. And to me at least, it came down to three main factors. 1. A lack of competition. In regards to cable channels focused on animation, there were the big three: Cartoon Network, Disney Channel, and Nickelodeon, with Nick being in an incredibly lucky position where when it premiered it only had to really compete with Disney Channel. And with them advertising and making their entire personality around being something new, different, and edgy, it gave them the perfect opportunity to gravitate kids' attention. Especially once they started their own original programming. There was something so cool about Nick that almost made their competitors seem more lame in comparison. Why watch Mickey Mouse when you could watch Ren and Stimpy? Reminds me a lot of the Sega versus Nintendo stuff that was happening, at the exact same time, wow. For me personally, I was glued to Nickelodeon 95% of the time as a kid. The only Disney cartoon I had any interest in was Phineas and Ferb, and I kept confusing Cartoon Network with Boomerang and assumed they just played lame old people shows. And so Nick kept all my attention. 2. Nickelodeon was fun. They prided themselves on being a network for kids by kids. Of course that wasn't true, but it's the image they successfully gave off to their viewers, showing kids the stuff they wanted to see, mainly focusing on gross art and stuff more relatable to them. Not only through its programming, but just the network as a whole had such a fun vibe to it. The unique bumpers and advertisements, you had Nick.com and magazine, which made Nickelodeon something you could follow along with, make it a part of your everyday. Now of course a large focus of this was for money-making purposes, making sure your kid always had another opportunity to support the company, but they made doing that engaging. Sadly, the magazine industry is something that also suffered from the rise of the internet. And along with that, folks have become much more accustomed to getting their entertainment from the same 3 or 4 social media websites. I can't imagine many kids today seeking out the current Nick.com. It's a lot of stuff outside of their control, and that's a shame. But unfortunately, this third factor was mainly a result of poor management. 3. Nickelodeon had good shows. Dated in a lot of cases, but the simple truth is, Nickelodeon used to stay up to date with a consistent string of quality cartoons, usually releasing 2 to 3 new series every year. Now, not all of them were hits, but at a certain point they were releasing at such a rate that there was always something to look forward to. And at least every now and then when they did release a piece of shit, you at least had confidence in there being one show that you wanted to watch on there. You know, if my options were to sit through half an hour of mediocrity to get to the stuff I wanted to see, or, I don't know, kick a ball outside, then sign me up for Fanboy and Chum Chum, let's go, I'll power through it. This time 20 years ago, Nickelodeon was getting ready to release Danny Phantom, one of their most iconic series of all time, with the character still being remembered fondly to this day. So much so that it was recently continued in graphic novel form. What is Nick putting out this year? Well, again, Rock, Paper, Scissors, a show that, again, seems alright. But I think it's safe to say that it is not going to be anywhere near as well remembered as the stuff they used to put out.
And let me tell you something about Nickelodeon, and I won't let them censor this.
And a big part of that is on their marketing. If a show doesn't become an immediate hit like SpongeBob or Loudhouse, then it's not running for more than 2 seasons. Other than those two, every original cartoon currently airing on the channel is only in its first season, with the rest being nothing but toy tie-ins like Transformers Earthspark or Monster High, or spin-offs and crappy reboots like Rugrats or Camp Coral. Stuff designed for the sole purpose of keeping a franchise relevant with something new and exciting, so it doesn't just seem as if they've been putting all their attention into the same 2 shows for the past decade. Which they have. Well, okay, and there's Big Neat. Seems fun, but It's Pony, Middlemost Post, Rise of the Ninja Turtles, all cartoons where, by the time I finally wanted to check them out, they were gone. It's a tired opinion, but really, SpongeBob got too big to fail. It seems like more often than not the higher-ups only put these other shows into production to ensure their investors that they're more than just the SpongeBob channel. Oh, but that's to ignore all their fantastic live-action programming currently airing, like The Really Loud House, Tyler Perry's Young Dylan, Aaron. These solo acts have to band together. Why does every kid's sitcom have to be about music? Also, that's it. I just named you every series that is currently airing, and I only knew of one of them that even existed before 5 seconds ago when I looked this up. Other than that, we're rapidly approaching the horrifying concept that is the era of 2010s nostalgia. I mean, we did just get the amazing comeback to the hit 2013 series, The Thundermans. Kill me. Something I've been talking about a lot with my friends recently is the idea of suffering for art. Like, Dan Schneider is evidently a pretty terrible human being, but let's be real, he made some good shows. Not just for kids either. My grandmother would watch iCarly and Drake and Josh with us and keep up with the plot points. There was something about his humor and style of comedy that just appealed to people. At the very least in a way that didn't come off as if it were talking down to its audience. Do these shows, being so iconic and well-remembered, justify that? No. Not even gonna entertain that thought. The world could have survived without the Amanda Show if it meant these kids didn't have to be emotionally abused on set. My thought process always comes to the fact that these people talk about Dan's work while ignoring what he was producing before getting fired in the kindest way possible. I wish YouTube would give me a $7 million check when I decide to stop uploading. Henry Danger, Game Shakers, animated Henry Danger. I grew up watching Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, iCarly, Victorious, even Sam and Cat for as briefly as it aired. I could tell by the time this shit aired, I was disinterested. He lost his touch. I also don't find it to be a coincidence that Nickelodeon only decided to get rid of the man when he stopped bringing them hit shows. But to come back to the topic of Dan choosing not to talk down to his audience, I really think that is the main factor as to why his shows were so popular. But also, what truly marked Nickelodeon's downfall. And it's that they lost sight of their target demographic. Kids. Growing up in this era, it felt like Nick and Disney Channel were always having such a pissing match with each other to see who could produce the more popular sitcom, and more importantly, who could appeal most to the frightening demographic that is tweens. Nick completely rebranding in 2010 to remove all the fun and charm from their presentation in favor of something sleeker and more cool, with the vice president at the time claiming it to highlight a new focus for the network, and it's no secret what that new focus was. Disney had struck gold with Hannah Montana, and with that, Dan eventually tried his hand at his own teen girl who sings sitcom. Literally every single kid's sitcom under the sun at that time tried to make their character a singer, even though it had no basis in the pre-established setup. Wizard, Sunny with a Chance, even iCarly for a little bit. After Hannah Montana, however, it seemed like Disney had lost the marathon. None of their sitcoms reaching anywhere near the success of Dan's, apart from arguably Wizards and maybe Sweet Life on Deck, but I'd argue that was a massive downgrade compared to the original. They still had successful shows, don't get me wrong, I remember Austin and Ally sticking around for a while. But it definitely seems like Nickelodeon's attempts stuck more with kids, and ironically, I think that came down to the adult nature of it. Tweens are in that awkward stage where they want to seem older. They don't want to be seen watching SpongeBob, but they also still watch Nickelodeon. And so Dan had creepily perfected the art of pushing the boundaries for what was acceptable for kids, just enough to appeal to them. It made Victorious and Sam and Cat especially seem so much older and more mature compared to your average kid sitcom. Sam and Cat literally had a fucking Breaking Bad parody and they got away with it. Why? Because Dan could do whatever the fuck he wanted. Are they really gonna question him? Nickelodeon worshipped the man. But as a result of that temporary success that couldn't be replicated after the man clearly ran out of steam, what was Nick left with? Their tween audience has been alienated because they don't want to watch a show about 4 annoying kids becoming millionaires through making Pro Jared's new favorite app. And kids who just want to see cartoons don't want to watch live action stuff, with a majority of Nick's animated material moving over to the much less popular Nicktoons network. They relied so much on Dan Schneider that once they were put in a position to let him go, they had nothing left. Except for SpongeBob, and Linking Lied. And so now, here we are. Nickelodeon has never been more relevant as an entertainment company. Disney Channel at least still creates cartoons that people are interested in watching, that they bother to at the very least promote. And Cartoon Network, well, okay, Cartoon Network's a story for another day, but they've done irreparable damage to their reputation and I'm not really sure how they can fix it apart from completely restructuring. But maybe that's coming sooner than we think. Last year, Nickelodeon rebranded to reincorporate the colors and abstract shapes that was once iconic to them. Certainly looks a lot better than this. And who knows if this is due to a genuine attempt at showcasing them shifting focus back to what made them so successful in the first place, or perhaps it's just trying to capitalize on nostalgia. But for their own sake, I certainly hope it's the former. Because I love Nickelodeon. It's something incredibly important to me. I'll never forget going to my great-grandmother's house after school and doing my homework while watching Fairly Odd Parents, getting so excited for summer approaching with them airing the School's Out musical. Or sitting up late at night with my sisters laughing at reruns of The Amanda Show and Drake and Josh. Watching the Kids' Choice Awards every year and being blown away by them integrating and interconnecting their cartoon series with the live action. At one point, Nickelodeon just made me happy. And I hope it can continue making kids happy in the future. But I suppose only time will tell.
Hey Mark, one time, I was totally Timmy Turner. Yeah, totally.
Out of all the Nicktoons that exist out there, I'd have to say my favourite is and always will be the Fairly Odd Parents. This really kickstarted Butch Hartman's career, with them continuing to make 3 other shows for Nick, albeit with differing degrees of success. And despite it being a meme, the guy kinda did have a hand in creating my childhood. I loved this show growing up. If it weren't for Fairly Odd Parents, it's likely I wouldn't be where I am today. It's the show that got me into drawing, which led me into wanting to be an animator, which led me to YouTube, which led me to depression. Now of course this is the obligatory part of the video where I said that the Fairly Odd Parents went into seasonal rot, and added character after character in desperate attempts for relevancy. First would be Poof. Then after they realised the baby had no story potential, they added Sparky. Then when they realised Sparky was annoying as all hell, they added Chloe. Then the show was cancelled before they had the chance to ruin it any further. Butch likes to excuse the decisions nowadays by saying, "Come on guys, we needed to add more characters since the show was on for so long. It needed something fresh."
I get one or two comments be like, well, the new episodes stink, they're so bad. Why did you add Sparky or why did you add Poof? Why? It's like, listen, we had to do something. We had to add new characters to keep the show fresh.
Which I would believe if it weren't for the fact that their neighbour SpongeBob is still airing new episodes with the same cast it had back in 1999. And I doubt people would have minded the new characters if they were, good. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. Instead, I'd like to focus on another one of the series' attempts to seem relevant, and bring in more viewers, that despite a few reviews here and there, I don't really see many people talk about. That of course being the live-action Fairly Odd Parents trilogy of movies. And considering I usually like to talk about movies in bunches, I think it's fitting to talk about them all in one video, to see if they managed to capture what made the early seasons of the show so special, or if it's just as awful as the later episodes. The idea of a live-action Fairly Odd Parents movie is really bizarre. To me, the series really could only work as a cartoon, since the concept of wishing for anything could push the limits of reality as much as the writers wanted to, so why even make these to begin with? I don't know. Come on, you can't expect me to have all the answers here. I can only assume Butch was sitting on his pile of money one day like, Drake Bell is kinda hot. What if? And now we're here. I mean, how did you think it went? That's the only reason I could see them getting such an unfitting actor to play Timmy. Let's just get into the first one. A Fairly Odd movie, Grow Up Timmy Turner.
I wish I was Drake Bell!
Okay, you're the boss! Hello, handsome!
No way!
Timmy Turner is now a 23-year-old man, but to keep his furries he has refused to grow up in any way. He still lives at home, goes to school in the same class, and has never fallen in love with a girl. Except for when he did. That's actually not a bad idea for a movie. It has a lot of potential, if it were thought through for even a second. But this movie is listed as a romantic comedy for some reason, and that's where Tootie comes in. Tootie in the original series was a young, whiny little girl who desperately wanted Timmy to fall in love with her, and obviously he avoided it at all costs. But now she's a hot environmentalist who cares about animals a lot, And that of course means Timmy falls in love with her at first sight. How shallow. So now Cosmo and Wanda have to try their best to keep Timmy from falling in love, or else they'll have to leave him forever. This is until Timmy's teacher Crocker teams up with an evil businessman, looking to build an oil factory in Dimsdale, so they kidnap the fairies and Tootie, so Timmy has to rescue them. Honestly, with a couple tweaks like removing the whole falling in love plot device, I think this story could have worked really well, but if it were me I would have gone in an entirely different direction. See, when Timmy starts to fall in love, it's followed by Cosmo and Wanda desperately trying to stop him, and to me it should have been the opposite. To me the only way this could work is if Timmy was completely set in his way about not being willing to give up Cosmo and Wanda, with even them wanting to move on. In a loving way of course, like a mum and dad looking for their child to move out of the house. And the movie would follow Timmy's journey in growing up, and leaving behind his childhood furries. But in this movie his growth is symbolized through getting a pink fedora? Wait, is that you, Butch? You sly dog. It would also do a good job at making Cosmo and Wanda the slightest bit likable. A problem with pretty much all of Butch Hartman's characters is that they're usually all simple stereotypes with no depth. But the more that the Fairly Odd Parents went on, the more these characters were flanderized, and eventually became stereotypes of the stereotypes. So instead of being a pair of hopeless romantics who occasionally get in a kerfuffle... The kerfuffle? Yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
I was sorry, and I would say I'm proud to be your wife, Wanda.
In later seasons they became a pair of one-note obnoxious idiots, who came across like they couldn't even stand being around each other, and this movie has them at their worst. I don't think there's a single part in this film where they acknowledge that they're married, or even that they somewhat like each other. In fact, there's way more examples of the opposite.
For once I agree with your shrill, commanding, and authoritative voice. I love you.
But how do the other characters fare? Well, first we've got Drake Bell as Timmy Turner. Yep, that is definitely how I pictured this kid to look when he was older. To be fair, he does an alright job at acting, with everything that isn't a fairy at least. They had stand-ins for where the fairies would be, but for the life of him he can't keep his eyes on them. Tootie is possibly one of the worst Miri Sues I've ever seen. She's portrayed as being perfect in every way, yet still falls in love with Timmy Turner, despite him acting like a literal child and his only friends being children. I would say it's fine as a plot device, but she's the central focus of the movie and takes up most of the screen time. There's also this really weird part where they're about to kiss when they hear a noise and turn around, causing Timmy to accidentally fall out of the tree. Then she starts freaking out like, oh my god, you did that not to kiss me despite us both turning to see the noise. Jesus Christ, why is he obligated to kiss you? This would be considered really creepy if it were the other way around.
Grow up, Timmy Turner! He said it! He said it!
The business guy is boring and should have been Doug Dimmadome. Moving on. There's also a fair amount of side characters who get the live action treatment, like Edge, Chester, Vicky, etc. But they add so little to the story that the first version I found cut all their scenes out and I didn't even realise until the end because it works just as well without them. Or I guess just as poorly without them. The only character that I would say is flat out great is Crocker. He perfectly captures the animated character, to the point where I thought he was played by the real voice actor, just like they did for Timmy's dad. But he isn't, he's just that good at it. The only bad thing I can say about him isn't even his fault, it's more of the direction. See, there's certain things you have to take into account when turning an animated show into live action, and it's how far you should go in keeping it close to the original. And surprisingly, this movie's issue for me is that it tries to be too faithful to the cartoon. I don't know if you've ever recognized this, but after I say it, you will not be able to unhear it. When you're watching a show created by Butch Hartman, it is painfully obvious it was created by Butch Hartman. And that is not shown more than through the music. Everything Butch does, Guy Moon is there to accompany him. Every time a character touches something, sound effect. Every time a character does any kind of action, sound effect. Anytime a character even speaks, you better believe there's a sound effect. And that just doesn't translate well to a real life setting. You know what else doesn't? Trying to make every cartoon set as accurate as possible in real life. Is it kinda cool to see? Sure. But it makes every location look like Springfield at Universal Studios, which really takes you out of the experience. And I can't help but wonder why this wasn't just another movie done in the usual 2D style like they've done before. Other than for marketability, of course. And I thought we all figured it out and agreed by the time the Timmy Jimmy Power Hours came out, but Butch's designs do not look appealing in 3D at all. In the Fairly Odd Parents, characters' mouths will extend up near their eyes, and it just doesn't work with CGI, it looks so uncanny and they can't express at all. So to end this off, Timmy rescues Tootie and his fairies from the businessman, that I still can't be bothered to learn the name of. By professing his love for Tootie, so now Timmy loses his fairies, but finally learns to grow up in the process, bringing the series to a bittersweet conclusion. is what I would be saying if this were written by someone competent. Who wrote this again? Okay, that explains it. Obviously, Butch Hartman wrote them. Instead of that, they find out about the Timmy Turner rule that states, I can't believe this is real. It states that any person that has used their furries in the past to save the world on multiple occasions, and just so happens to be called Timmy Turner, gets to keep their furries forever, as long as they choose to use the powers for good. What? I'm going to try to contain myself for a bit and try to explain this as calmly as possible. A running theme of the original series that I never really appreciated was that eventually when he got old enough, Timmy would lose his furries and forget even having them. And the show did explore at times how Timmy tried to manipulate the system to try keep them forever before finally coming to terms with the fact that he was going to need to give them up at one point, and that Cosmo and Wanda had kids before him, and will continue to have kids after him. It's something you see as a kid and go, what? That's so unfair, why can't Timmy be with Cosmo and Wanda forever? But just like Timmy, the older I got, the more I realized that losing his godparents was something that needed to happen, and it gives their relationship a stronger bond, you know? It makes the time they spend together more important. But screw that, am I right? Who wants any kind of emotional stakes in a show? So yeah, not a great film. It's full of dumb, cringy writing, bad, unlikable characters, and its faithfulness to the show ends up hindering its potential. But I dislike it more in the fact that it ruins one of the best parts of the original series, and removes it for a lame, gimmicky ending, only there to set up other movies. You know where this is going. Somehow the first Fairly Odd movie was a huge hit, being seen by almost 6 million people when it initially premiered, so Butch and his team got back together to create a sequel. But not just any sequel, a Christmas movie. This one sees Timmy and gang being brought to the North Pole, where it's revealed to them that all their selfless wishing is leading to less and less people wanting gifts from Santa. And after a mishap that gives him amnesia, Timmy Turner is now tasked with being the new Santa Claus. Yes, this is just a Tim Allen movie. So the plot is basically an adventure where Timmy, Tootie, Cosmo, Wanda, Crocker, and 2 elves have to travel across the North Pole to get Timmy off the naughty list. And I mean, I can't really be too mad at this plot. It's so separated from the core themes of the show and is more of a standalone adventure that I can't really be mad at it like I could the first. Now of course that doesn't mean I can't be mad at other aspects.
Life is pain.
The first Fairly Odd movie already looked very cheap, but with this one it seemed the budget was sliced in half. This literally just looks like a Santa suit bought from the store. I'm guessing most of the budget was spent sending the crew up to a snowy mountain. It's at least commendable this wasn't all done on green screens. The characters basically all act the same in the worst way possible. Like Amiri Sue might be able to work as a plot device in the first, but after that she just has nothing interesting to add. Again, the only one here that really works is Crocker. This man cares way too much about giving a great performance.
Ooh, time to use my patented Crocker blend-in technique. Yoink!
I can imagine the only reason his character was brought into this one is because the writers knew how great his actor was, and he continues to be the highlight. This is going to seem really minor and I guarantee nobody cares about this except me, but something I love to see in cartoons is how many different outfits a character can have that still follows the same color scheme. And it really bothers me how selective they are about it in these movies. Timmy's hat? Pink as usual. Timmy's fedora? Also pink. It's good. His snow jacket? Red? Give him a pink Santa hat, that's all I want. Just look at the Scooby-Doo movies. They are constantly wearing the same color schemes and it's hilarious. As you can see, I barely have anything to say about this one, it's just kind of okay. Every time I get bored and feel like tearing my eyes out, there's that little bit of hope from Crocker that keeps me interested. And for that I at least say it's better than the first one. That's gotta be something. It also helps that it's got a very basic structure of the gang going to different set pieces with them eventually finding the elf that makes the naughty list, where he is taken off and is able to go around the world and deliver presents to the kids of the world. Oh, head, don't just drop them off like that, you're supposed to like throw them down into the chimney, they're gonna hit someone. Okay, whatever. After that, Timmy's congratulated for saving Christmas, and the fairies and elves resolve their differences. Oh shit, that's right, I forgot to mention the elves. They add nothing. I'm sorry if this is a little anticlimactic, there's honestly nothing I can say about this one, it's just a fine children's movie and that's it. Okay, surely that's all. Timmy Turner's first jump to live action, I can see why that would do well. I doubt anyone cared about Drake Bell trying to save Christmas though. Nearly 5 million viewers? Was there really nothing else to watch that day? You know what, I can't exactly point fingers, I was one of those 5 million. And this brings us to the true epic conclusion in the Fairly Odd movie trilogy, Fairly Odd Summer. Like the yin and yang, this movie, instead of taking place in a freezing cold setting, has our characters visit an extremely warm setting. And by characters, I mean all the characters, like every single person in Timmy's life suddenly wants to go to Hawaii. His mum and dad are going as they've been given a check to set up a party for his job. Tootie has to deliver some science thing to a science guy. Jorgen is going because why not? And because he's still the best character, Crocker is also headed to Hawaii, where he crosses paths with Foop. Now Foop is a character that was added after Poof came into the picture. All the furries have an anti-furry equivalent that acts as the opposite of them. And of course that means the opposite of Poof is an actually interesting character. So despite them becoming friends and saving each other's lives in the first movie, Crocker now wants to kill Timmy again. And I can't really blame him. Look at Timmy, he's just constantly boasting about his furries everywhere in public, right there in the open. Remember how fun it was to see Cosmo and Wanda try to hide in creative ways in public? 3D models sure are expensive. And speaking of these models, it looks like their halved budget was cut even further because there's just no effort anymore to make them blend in with the real world. They end up just blurring the background to all hell most of the time to hide this fact. This is also the first time we get to see Fairy World in live action. This is gonna be so cool. What's the point if you're just gonna use 2D illustrations? Anyway, I got off track. Foop and Crocker plan on stealing the power source that the furries use for their magic, and because Timmy is currently taking care of it, they have to steal it from him. By impersonating Mumpy Jones. That is like literally the exact same mask. This is also where the gang meets some brand new characters. Boy and girl. They have rich parents and their babysitter Vicky was tasked with taking them to Hawaii because of course she was. And from this, Timmy and Tootie help them to get away from her. That's all I have to say about them. I know I'm saying this for like half the characters, but they have nothing to do. I don't know why they're even added. So eventually Foop and Crocker make their way to a volcano after being stuck on the same beach set for the past 30 minutes of the movie, where Timmy arrives to stop them, and also save Tootie and the kids, because they were like stuck there I guess. And also Crocker and I, because obvious dumb betrayal is obvious. Timmy grabs the power source and is ready to fight Foop in an epic action-packed finale. Oh my god, what the hell? Did that really kill Timmy? I gotta give props to you, Butch. That's a bold move. Oh, no, Butch.
It means I'm just like you guys. This is awesome.
Please understand that I have a very strong connection to this show when I say this, but come on, really? To me, the great thing about the Fairly Odd Parents was despite the magical setup, it had a very realistic heart. It was a great representation for how the people from your childhood aren't going to be in your life forever. The bad people and the good. And I don't think even Butch realised this, because if he did, turning Timmy into a furry as the finale to the Fairly Odd Parents canon so we can always see Cosmo and Wanda is one of the worst ways to conclude the series.
The only reason I got you guys in the first place is because I had a mean babysitter. I know I'll lose you when I'm older, so I'm not taking any chances until then. If that means a few more years of putting up with Vicky, then it's totally worth it.
And honestly doesn't even make sense. Why does Timmy become Tootie's fairy godparent? She's a grown woman with a great life, and this isn't even the last time they'd do that. Again, I know I didn't talk about this one much, but like the Christmas movie, there's nothing to say. It is the worst of the trilogy, but it's just a really boring and generic kids film, and the only reason I remember it is because of the awful ending. So despite the title, Timmy never really grew up. He gotta stay a kid forever. The worst thing about this is that it makes one of the best episodes of the series, and in my mind the perfect conclusion to the show, entirely retconned. Or does it? I really need to know if this is canon or not to put my mind at ease. Thankfully one of my patrons reached out to Butch. Link in description. But he sadly didn't respond, that heartless son of a Butch. If only there was some other way to find out.
Hi, it's me, Timmy Turner, and I just want to say all the Fairly Odd Parents movies starring Drake Bell are canon, and I love them all.
Oh, thanks anyway, Timmy. I'm sorry about what Butch did to your show.
Also, subscribe to LS Mark. Thank you!
Thanks, Timmy. I appreciate it. But I'm gonna need to hear this from a more official source. If only there was some way I could ask Butch myself. But he's such a huge star. How could I even contact him?
I loved working on the Fairly Odd Parents live action movies. It was so much fun to turn, Timmy Turner into a live person. And then it was my idea to make the fairies into CGI characters. And we couldn't really afford to do them for the whole movie, which is why they turned into people halfway through the movie. So here the question, is it canon? Are these stories canon? I would equate it to this. You know how there's the Spider-Man comic books? There's like 47,000 titles for Spider-Man. And then there's all the Spider-Man movies. And I think the Fairly Odd Parents movies are kind of like canon the way those Spider-Man movies are canon. They take pieces of the comic books, and make them into elements for the movie. Same with the Fairly Odd movies. We took pieces of the show and made them into 90-minute narratives that hopefully entertained people. Are they canon completely? It's kind of weird. I don't really know what to say about that because Timmy's all grown up. Gosh, I wish I had a more intelligent answer for that. I'm just being straight up with you. I wish I could tell you.
Oh. Well, that was easy.
And I think I drew a commission for you.
You know, it's taken me this long to realize that the name Poof would be considered offensive. I grew up in the UK, I should have figured. So the brand new Fairly Odd Parents sequel series, A New Wish, has continued trucking along since that initial review I did of the first batch of episodes a month ago. And as of now, a majority of the show has aired. I still plan on getting out a giant review of the entire thing once it finally ends, but something I want to talk about was how genuinely shocking it's been to see the show blowing up all over social media. And for the first time in like 15 years with this franchise, it's actually in a positive way. Yeah, New Wish has pretty quickly built up a sizable following. Who knows how many of these folks are actually supporting the series and not just watching clips re-uploaded to Twitter and TikTok, but people are enjoying it, and I guess that's what matters most. I think. And it's pretty evident that the rise in popularity is down to two factors. The first being that since it's airing straight to TV and not being dumped all at once on a streaming service nobody has, it's allowed the show much more breathing room to draw people's attention. When you're airing a new episode almost every day for a month and a half, it, unsurprisingly, results in a month and a half of near constant discussion. I don't think folks would be talking about this show nearly as much if it were all dropped in a single day. It gives you time to take in each episode and appreciate it instead of immediately moving on to the next like it's constant slop. Now, if only we could start doing this for streaming so there are people to actually watch the show. And the second, the much larger factor here, let's be real, being A New Wish frequently roping in characters from the original series, showing that there's a surprising amount of nostalgia for the Fairly Odd Parents. With all the hatred flung towards anything the show had done past season 5, it's sometimes easy to forget that this was like the second biggest kids show on TV for years. Because of that, even the mere return of a less popular character like AJ is being met with monstrous applause. Speaking of monstrous, why does he look like that? See, like I mentioned near the end of my last video, I didn't really see many people talking about this show aside from the same few diehard Fairly Odd Parents fans, all 5 of us. But that all suddenly changed with one moment that skyrocketed the series into public consciousness.
Miserable? Hey kid, I'm Pooh. Well, at least I was. I changed my name to Perry.
Yeah, in a shocking turn of events, well, shocking to people who didn't have folks spamming them with the leaked pitch Bible last year, thanks, Cosmo and Wanda's baby Poof has made his grand return to the franchise after being all but forgotten in not only the previous sequel series, but also towards the end of the original show altogether. They sent him off to school, made him talk just like Timmy for some reason, turned him into Trump for a second, it's a mess, watch the ranking. But suddenly everyone is now on the edge of their seats, waiting to see which character is going to return next. Crocker? AJ? Vicky? I think that's Cupid. Gross. I wasn't sure what to think when I heard they'd be reintroducing classic characters to the show. In some ways, it does tickle that dopamine in my brain that just wants to see old Fairly Odd Parents characters in current year. Something it seems the staff became aware of too, some of these are as blatant as can be. Not to mention you'd hope with a new series they'd make sure not to overly rely on elements from the previous. You know, you don't want a case where people are only interested in watching your show when it's referencing stuff from their childhood. But upon watching these episodes, I came to the realization that when it comes to cartoon sequels, A New Wish really went about this in the best way possible. And that the return of older elements never feels like it takes away from their own original characters and storylines. Something that easily could have fallen to the wayside in favor of shoving the nostalgia down your throat. And so I wanted to take some time today to go over how A New Wish goes over its treatment of the Fairly Odd Parents legacy characters and how, in a way, it almost redeems what the series later became. How they're taking elements from all over the franchise instead of just the parts people liked. Also, just to stress this as much as possible, in this video I'm only going to be focusing on the reintroductions of stuff from the original Fairly Odd Parents. This isn't a review of the show or anything, I have a much bigger video planned for that once the season ends, so subscribe for that and stuff. Again, just to get it out there, I do have some issues with the series, not a huge fan of everything it does, but you can watch my first impressions video if you want a greater sense of what those are. Either way, let's get into it. Before the characters themselves, though, something I wanted to point out that I appreciate a lot is that Poof God it is so hard to call him Perry. Perry's introduction in the series doesn't come until the 17th episode. Before then, the most we have gotten from the original show was the reappearance of minor characters like Father Time, them using the terrible Timmy Secret Wish special where he reveals that he froze time for 50 years as some lame meta-commentary about none of the characters ever aging that I still see all over TikTok like it's some big reveal and not a shitty ratings trap. Sorry you had to see that. They used that conflict as a way to now establish that any wish relating to time needs to go through Father Time. Stuff like that does an excellent job in opening up the world more and puts our new god kid Hazel in more situations where she has to interact with other magical beings. That was an incredibly smart decision. Anyways, because they wait so long before introducing any major characters from the original, it gives the series a solid half a season to ease old and new viewers into this slightly different world. With shows nowadays not getting anywhere near the amount of episodes that they once did, there's gotta be some kind of pressure on the staff's part to rush through your story and make sure it gets all of it out there before the imminent threat of cancellation, which oftentimes can result in a show's storyline feeling super rushed and underdeveloped, like they're only capable of painting the broad strokes of what they want to do instead of the full picture. It's the kind of thing that makes you appreciate stuff like the more laid-back, tiny episodes of Steven Universe. We get to see the characters in some lower stakes situations, and therefore, not only is there some contrast for when shit gets real, but we've also had the time to grow closer to these guys and care more about whatever plight it is they're facing. And that's what brings us to Perry, the first major shakeup in the series. They could have easily just had an episode where we see Cosmo and Wanda meet him in Fairy World or something, Hazel gets to say hi, they have a little adventure, all's well that ends well. But instead, they go a step further and integrate him into the small arc they've already been setting up with the new character, Dev. He's a dick.
On your watch. Do they also tell time? No.
While initially being introduced as nothing more than a one-note asshole Hazel has to deal with at school, over the course of the season the two grow closer together as we learn that a large reason why Dev is the way he is a result of his father's neglect. And so after a fight between he and Hazel, he becomes a prime candidate for his own fairy godparent. If anything, he warrants one more. It seems like he's by far become the fan favorite character here. He's basically Remy Bucksaplenty with more depth. There are a lot of similarities between Remy and he, as a matter of fact. I mean, the reason for having godparents is basically the exact same. Only difference is now that we have a show where the characters are a little less one note, it actually allows them to do more stuff with the concept of two kids having godparents, especially in the following episodes where both of their secrets are revealed to each other. Cosmo, Wanda, and Perry finally being reunited, which was nice to see, even if Perry's reason for wanting to avoid them is a tad forced. I really love Perry's character design. It's the perfect culmination of Cosmo and Wanda while avoiding the bad DeviantArt fanfiction it easily could have fallen into. Wait a second. I'm also a big fan of his voice, leaning into something more similar to Cosmo's personality from the Oh Yeah cartoon shorts. That was for sure a clever compromise. See, because Remy lost his fairy in his very first episode, it resulted in a lot of missed potential within he and Timmy's rivalry. Something they quickly realized as they just gave him one Decimo back right after. But even then, he was severely underutilized. This isn't even really about Remy, as again his character is pretty one note, but just the concept of Timmy interacting with other kids who have fairies. And because of that, I think it was a smart move for this show to go in a different direction and start splitting the attention between Hazel and Dev at times. It reminded me a lot of the dynamic between Timmy and Chloe in the later seasons. But like, good. If anything, it finally made me see the potential Chloe as a character had. The issue there, of course, came when Cosmo and Wanda are now being shared between the two, meaning each of the characters has to be in every episode, which limits things a bit. I think instead of having them be shared between the two, perhaps it would have been cooler to have Timmy lose a godparent. You know, it was always weird that he had two. What if one day Cosmo just disappeared and Wanda couldn't explain why, before eventually Timmy finds out that he got reassigned to Chloe? If this were like the early seasons, perhaps there could have been a more serialized approach to this, where Timmy and Chloe are now forced to spend time with each other, butting heads initially before slowly growing closer over the course of an entire season. And then that could lead to some big finale where the two of them then agree to share godparents. I don't know. Wishful thinking and all, I don't know, I think it could have been fun. What I'm getting at is, a new Wish's way of handling things is really showing me how much more could have been done in the original series if they didn't opt to make it a lame sitcom for the final few seasons. Perry being here allows Dev to join in on more adventures, and gives Hazel someone more on her level to interact with. Again, in the original, Timmy's regular and fairy life always felt super separated to the point where they forget his friends existed a lot of the time. Quite literally forgot they existed by the end of its run. And so certain decisions like reintroducing Perry and even having Cosmo and Wanda have the front of Hazel's human neighbors allows these worlds to blend together way more frequently. Speaking of Timmy's friends, Kingpin.
It's not always about the money, Hazel. Okay, you can get that out of you, I'm sorry.
Gonna go out on a limb and say AJ was nobody's favorite Fairly Odd Parents character or anything. He wasn't bad, but a little bland. Especially compared to Chester. I mean, have you tried Chester O's dude? Hell, they even dedicated one of their specials to him, which I couldn't imagine them being able to do with AJ. And while we still don't have an idea of how much he's gonna reappear in what little of the season we have left, I like that they bring him back as a way of expanding the world more, us learning about how he's founded the Galax Institute, which investigates the paranormal. Also just so happens to be where Hazel's dad got a job teaching at, the whole reason they moved to this new town in the first place.
Anthony James Jr. won't be present. He founded the Galax Institute when he was just 10 years old.
AJ doesn't do much other than that, he's pretty interchangeable, but again, it's a neat bit of world building, and I like that they bothered bringing back his voice actor from back in the day. The one thing I'm not a massive fan of when it comes to all this is that AJ and the Galax Institute and Hazel's dad by proxy, being a part of this massive organization that investigates the paranormal, kinda makes Crocker less special. Oh yeah.
Hey, Denzel Crocker.
Should I know what that means?
I suppose not.
Crocker also shows up in this series as an elderly man who's since moved on from teaching at Dimsdale Elementary to try and join the Galax Institute as, well, you know, they're basically all he could have ever wanted in the original. Him no longer being the sole person to believe in and seeking out magic doesn't ruin him. If anything, I think it could have worked really well if there were more of an established cause and effect. Like what AJ experienced in being so close to Timmy when he had godparents was what made him interested in the paranormal or something. I don't know, you could have found some kind of narrative way for it to make sense. Didn't the original series have an entire episode about AJ and Chester going on an investigation and almost figuring out Timmy's secret? There you go, easy. By far, Crocker's the most needless addition to the show, but at the same time, I think they do a good enough job at explaining to you his motivation. You know, not every character needs some grand epic reason as to why they're returning. And having a character who's actually suspicious of Hazel and trying to capture her fairies is an easy but effective way to build some stakes. We literally have humans staring and reacting to the fairies in this show, which is an occasionally annoying oversight, so it's nice when they do remember that these guys are meant to be kept a secret. Who knows how often Crocker will come back in the future, but I can't imagine it'll be much, which is why I think this is fine. The character was run into the ground, there's not much more to do with him, unless they wanted to go in a drastically different direction and try to make him more sympathetic or something. Maybe Hazel tries to help him redeem himself, who knows, I wouldn't be shocked. And the moment where he brings up Timmy was pretty fun, even if just an easy reference.
I used to terrorize with the pink hat. What was his name? Toby Trombone.
Quite possibly the biggest change to a returning character had to have been Cupid, for obvious reasons.
And find me the dope who is responsible for this latte. It's fabulous.
He's gay, get it? On its own, I can see some folks being upset by this. I mean, Cupid here is practically an entirely different character. New design, new voice, shit in his pants. Didn't need to see that. And while I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with presenting a gay character as more flamboyant, like, surely there are gay people who act like that. I think the issue more so comes from this being treated as his only real character trait in the original, a direct result of how shallow a lot of the characters are in that show. Especially because you have a character whose whole thing is dealing with love, so making him a gay stereotype is a little obvious. With that being the case, I'm actually glad they decided to completely redesign him. If you're gonna go through all these lengths to change his fundamentals, then you might as well not even pretend he has any connotations to the original. Even if I do miss Tom Kenny's performance, his voice was pretty infectious. If dated, I get it. I think what mainly makes up for this is that Cupid's introductory episode is one of the best from the first season so far in my opinion, as Hazel takes her parents back to the day they first met for their anniversary, now having to make sure that everything plays out the same way while Cupid attempts to sabotage her by bringing in one of her mom's old flames. They set him up as more of an antagonist, which is a different but welcome direction to take him in. I like his dumb baby walk. A character in which they took the opposite approach in would have to have been the recently revealed Vicky, Timmy's once babysitter but now he's just a general children's entertainer. She's basically the same, although they toned down a lot of her more sadistic tendencies. I don't think we're gonna get any scenes of her chasing Hazel with a knife. How the hell did they get away with that? I can see a couple people out there disappointed that she's by far the character to get the most minimal changes made to her design. It's really just a pair of eye bags and that's it. But it works. I imagine it would have been a tad strange if they went for something more akin to her 18-year-old design from Channel Chasers. People would have had a fucking field day. All Vicky needed to be was a copy-paste of how she was in the old series. And it's for that reason I think she's the one who translated to this new show the best. She tortures kids in a show where the kids can basically fight back. It pretty much writes itself. But even then, they go a step further. See, earlier in the series, we get the amazing reveal that Dev's dad is Deal Dimmadome, heir to the Dimsdale Dimmadome fortune. A really surprising callback to Nectar the Odds, where Timmy and Vicky both run rival lemonade stands so we can get a ticket to Crash Nebula. On ice. There's a gag in there about her kidnapping kids and keeping them underground to make her lemonade, in which we see at the end that one of these kids' parents is none other than Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. I was genuinely not expecting them to go this far, but Vicky makes a reference to this, which therefore gives her greater motivation to want to torture Dev as she in some way feels entitled to the success given to his dad.
Heard of him? I made him! He was the laziest worker in my lemonade stand!
I know a lot of this can come off as cheap fan service, but I really think it all comes together in how they take things a step further with the references. It's usually an aid of serving some kind of incitement for these characters. But on the other hand, I don't know, I like the fan service. I liked they replay Icky Vicky. It's like I'm torn between two sides of myself. The side that wants this stuff to be in service of something, and the side that finds it sweet and gratifying that Cosmo and Wanda finally got to call out Vicky to her face, along with Perry showing that he's clearly been traumatized by her as a baby.
And you're in big trouble for being so mean to Timmy! Dev.
So I do want to make sure I stress this, because I'm not typically an advocate of a show doing references for the sake of references. I know Wish's returning elements aren't good because of nostalgia, Not entirely, at least. But it's because they use them as a way of elevating what's already here. Either through taking these story beats from the original cartoon to its logical evolution, like Perry now being a godparent, or as a way of building up this world more, like showing AJ creating a whole magical investigation institute, or perhaps in one of their cooler story beats, reintroducing Foop. I mean, IREP doesn't roll off the tongue nearly as well.
I'm Foop.
Okay, I'm just not realizing that's why they got Eric Bauza to voice Perry, because he voiced Foop in the original series, and of course all the anti-fairies sure a voice actor with the regular counterparts. Okay, smart. Despite a pretty ugly design that looks a bit out of place in a show like this, I mean, they weren't given much to work with, let's be fair. I think they introduce IREP in a really cool way. One of my favorite concepts in the Fairly Odd Parents as a kid came in the Fairy Odd Olympics, where Timmy makes a bet with the anti-fairies and pixies, which states that he promises to become the god kid of whoever wins. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense there though, because we're not given much of a reason as to why they would even want him. It's an episodic series, so the episode just starts with them wanting his attention. However, here, in an incredibly cool combination of story beats, they're playing a similar angle to that, alongside a rule that was only ever mentioned in the Fairy Idol special, where Norm the Genie's whole plan is to convince Cosmo and Wanda to quit so that he can take over as a godparent. With Perry getting increasingly tired of Dev being, well, Dev, he quits, which unknowingly sets I'm just gonna call him Foop, which unknowingly sets Foop up to become Dev's new fairy godparent for them to wreak havoc around the town with rule-free wishes. I'm pretty disappointed this was undone by the end of the episode, but it makes sense. Although it seems like we'll see more of Dev and the anti-fairies, with him not wanting to research them, which will be cool. Either way, this is another seriously cool way of bringing back an older character. And the best part is, Foop fucking sucked. I distinctly remember really liking the episode of Fairly Odd Parents where Foop was introduced, me and my siblings laughing at his silly British accent. But they started abusing this guy incredibly quickly. All the other anti-fairies disappeared entirely in favor of only ever focusing on him, made even worse once he teams up with Dark Laser and Mr. Crocker to try and take down Timmy like it's all they ever think about. It's when that show completely lost the plot and forgot what it was even about. Like, Crocker didn't want to kill Timmy Turner, he wanted to prove that fairies existed. It just so happens that he suspected Timmy had fairies. But you're like, teamed up with a fairy now, isn't that good enough? Sorry, I could talk about this fucking franchise for hours. More hours. Point is, after a while Foop got real old. And so what I think I can appreciate most about his reappearance in A New Wish is that they're finally doing something new with the character that wasn't even all that good to begin with. I love that this show isn't just acting like the Fairly Odd Parents ended after season 5. They're embracing the entire series, even the bits that arguably killed the show. I think it's reflective of how these elements they later introduced, like Chloe as I said before, weren't bad ideas, just really poorly executed. In an episode where Hazel and Dev get lost while exploring Fairy World, we see them go to Hocus Pocus, a place where all unwished wishes go. Which, like Father Time, was something introduced in Timmy's Secret Wish all the way in season 8. They make fun nods to Sparky and don't act embarrassed about their history like it would have been very easy for them to do. And the best part is, if they did ignore all that, nobody would have blamed them. Of course you wouldn't want to bring back the dog or the Stewie Griffin baby, but I think it shows a level of ambition on this team's part to bring it all back and try to finally make some of these lesser popular aspects of the Fairly Odd Parents work. Of course, they still need to have their show stand on its own and not solely be in reference to the original, but in what we've seen so far, I think they're handling this about as well as you possibly could. It actually makes me excited to see who's going to show up next. My personal hope is for Chester with a grand return by Jason Marsden. Maybe he's coaching the local baseball team. I don't care that everyone suddenly lives in Dimmodelphia. Who gives a shit? I think the anti-fairies or the pixies could be fun inclusions that would make sense. Always felt there was a lot of missed opportunity with those different factions of the magical realm. Although the sad part with the pixies is you'd probably have to recast them, and unfortunately there goes most of their charm. Either way though, I want to end this by addressing the question that's on everybody's mind. When will Timmy appear? And I think we get so caught up in the prospect of what that could possibly entail that we forget to ask ourselves, should Timmy appear? Of course it would probably tug on our heartstrings unless they made him a bum, that would suck. I'd pray for Channel Chaser's ending to become canon, Alec Baldwin or not, but at the same time, maybe there's something nice about not knowing. The whole point of Timmy getting fairies was to help him grow into a better person despite his poor living conditions. And given that, maybe a more interpretive ending is for the best. What happened to Timmy? Well, whatever you want for him. Although I personally have a fucking great way they could reintroduce Timmy for an episode, but I'm gonna save that discussion for the whole season review as I feel like we've kinda went on for a while here. We've already gotten word that Timmy at the very least won't be appearing in season 1, which I definitely think is for the best. We definitely don't need him taking the spotlight away from Hazel and making her feel less important to the legacy character. But if a season 2 does get greenlit, which is becoming increasingly more concerning the closer we get to the end of the first, I'd be interested in seeing how they handle it, because if it's anything like we've seen so far, I'm sure it'll be great.